Welcome to the Galen Trombley Show. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the episode. You can follow me on social media at Galen Trombley. I hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Please hold for a very important message. Lightspeed sequence initiated.
How may I help you?
Bonjour.
Security breach.
The truth shall set you free. Awesome. It's a miracle.
Stabilizing. 3, 2, 1. Mission complete.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Get going here. So, welcome everybody. Episode 257. Galen Trombley Show, returning guest, one of my all-time favorite guests. I think one of the best. Between your knowledge and ability to hold a conversation, which are like two things that I like when people come on this. You nail both of them. So, Jon Mulholland. He is chiropractor and clinic owner at Ideal Athlete Chiropractic in Plattsburgh. Been doing this for a long, or you've been doing this for a long, long time, along with a bunch of stuff with Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, consultant for New Zealand Olympic cycling team, consultant for the USA Bobsled and skeleton teams, amongst a bunch of other stuff. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You've been on, so we don't want to. If people want to hear the whole background, we'll go back. This is going to be kind of more diving into extra stuff and new topics and
Yeah, looking forward to it.
fun things. So, John, keep going about the skiing today. So you went up backcountry skiing. I know you do that. I do have a couple questions on the one I saw the other day at Whiteface when you went up on that one, and it had like kind of like this above the clouds.
Yeah. So I do a little bit of every kind of skiing. I don't know how people don't have hobbies around here in the winter. I do know several of them, and most of them are quite miserable. And embrace the cold if you got to live in it, and can't retire in Florida yet. Or wherever you'd like to go. So yeah, I do a little bit of regular downhill skiing at Whiteface usually or Jay. But what I've really gotten to love the last 4 or 5 years is more backcountry. And backcountry is where you put special things on the bottom of your skis and that let you grip, and you can walk up like I do. Like today I did Lion Mountain. You can do a lot of the high peaks, and you skin. It's called skinning up. And then at the top, you take the skins off, and in some cases, my setup, you can lock your heels like a regular downhill ski and ski back down through the woods.
How easy is it to ski? Like or how easy is it to climb with skins on? I should say.
Other than the physical fitness part,
because like right here, this is basically them skinning up.
Yeah, and that's out west, clearly, where you have these beautiful open, above tree line, and they can kind of pick. They like in that picture, they're walking kind of more sideways across the slope.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the Adirondacks doesn't really ever look like that. So you're basically usually skinning up pretty much a straight vertical at whatever the least tight trees are. And it's tough. It's technical, and it's super narrow. And yeah.
I mean, how often do you slip going up?
The slipping isn't much of an issue. So
so they hold pretty well.
They hold pretty well. You can't walk up a vertical, sheet of ice. But when it gets too steep, actually the bindings that you hook your boots into actually have little heel raises. So when the pitch gets steeper, you can flip those up. So you're a little less stress on your calves.
Kind of like this right here.
Yep. And when it gets too steep, you start going more diagonal, back and forth, kind of switchbacking across the slope.
Is that possible? Like you said, on some places with dense trees, is that even possible?
To going up or coming down?
I mean, either one, going sideways, because most of the time...
No, that's the problem in the Adirondacks. Yeah. So Adirondacks are quite unique, and I'm no expert, but even in areas that are well conserved, like Vermont and New Hampshire, have a much, I won't say older because it's not older, but I guess just a bigger history with backcountry skiing. So there's actually a lot of areas in Vermont and New Hampshire that have been groomed, like where little saplings have been trimmed to allow for actual better skiing for people that want to do backcountry skiing. Adirondacks, the rules and regulations inside the blue line. You can't do any of that. And in fact, other than a couple of exceptions from years and years ago, one being the Wright Peak, which is one of the high peaks over by Algonquin, there's a ski trail there that's been cut kind of for skiing, and it's wider. But other than that, Galen, it's crazy because I think, again, I'm no expert, but I think if you checked with some of the rangers, I think it's only like 6 or 8 feet wide is the permissible width that you could cut a hiking trail.
Is that coming and going?
That's
up
just
and down?
Period.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to make a brand new trail, I think the width. I mean, I'm sure you've done some hiking.
Yeah.
And they're not very wide.
No.
And so
That's
you can
about right. You said
6 feet. I think maybe 8. So it's not like you can cut this thing made for skiing. So it's more kind of like you got to be pretty good on skis. And you'd better be pretty good at learning how to scrub speed whenever you get a chance.
So when you come down, if you're coming down the hill, let's say you're going up Lion Mountain and you want to traverse or you want to ski back down.
Yep.
Is there oftentimes someone's traversing up as you're trying to ski down, where like you would have to cross paths?
Yeah. So yes and no. Lion Mountain specifically we do not go up. We're not skiing really anywhere near the hiking trail. It's a totally different part of the mountain.
But I mean, other skiers coming up.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. So today, no, because the conditions were horrible and I was the fool for being out there in the first place. No one else was silly enough. I just wanted to work out. But after the snow, what was that, last week? I passed 8 or 9 people one day on a Saturday morning where, you can hear people coming down and you just, I was with my dog that day. So you just step off to the side and they come kind of skiing down.
So you yield for the people coming down?
Yeah. Although going up is more strict, I guess kind of a little more strict in that whoever sets the track, they call it the skin track, where you kind of tend to just follow who's been before just because it's easier.
So you don't necessarily ski down the same track?
No. Okay. No. And some of the times you do, some of the times you don't. So in Lion Mountain, there's stretches where you're just skiing along the skin track on the way down, just like you're like a little bobsled run. And then other times with Lion, what makes it so nice is there are 3 different areas that open up into like these birch glades where then you can get off the skin track and you can pick your own line kind of down through the powder between the trees. Exactly
so
like
this
that.
says glade skiing on Lion Mountain. So this
There you go.
Like this is more open. Like
that's one of the glades.
Okay.
That's where you pick your own line. And then at the bottom of the glade, you just keep an eye on where the skin track is. And now you kind of do the flatter stuff along the skin track. And then it gets steep and opens up and you kind of pick your own thing again. And, that's exactly where I was today.
And this is what it looks like going down most of the way.
Yeah, except today there was just no powder and just rock hard solid ice everywhere, which is why no one else was out there.
So when you go down Lion, when you hit spots what's the technique if you're going down and it's not good snow? I mean, when you're going over rocks, sometimes you just kind of bump over them.
Very, very slowly.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a real decent skier. I am no expert. I can get down just about anything. It just might take me a little longer than some others. I've seen guys that are just, world class that just fly down through these glades. But again, it all comes down to conditions, right? When you've got, boot deep or knee deep powder, it's a lot more forgiving on mistakes, and it helps control your speed innately when the powder's deep.
When you're in powder, because I've only I've skied. When I say I've skied, I think I'm still under 30 times skiing in my life. So like it's not, I don't go that often, but I've only been in powder a couple times. I found that powder is very slick at times. It feels slow because you got to go through it, but I find it sometimes you just like, it's almost like you slip out of the snow a little bit. Like you don't fall backwards, but it does kind of these little bursts of acceleration.
Well,
and almost like break through.
Yeah, I think the tendency is it's a totally different sport than regular skiing groomed surfaces. More, right? Well, no, but that's one of the bigger mistakes people make is the instinct is to sit back.
Okay.
And you shouldn't really sit back because that's when you feel like your skis are shooting out in front of you, as if your weight gets too far back. And so you still want to be balanced on the skis. Part of it too around here is that a lot of people just don't have powder skis. Why would you?
Especially those wider?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Wider skis because most people are skiing at the resorts.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of friends that I ski with casually at Whiteface, and God forbid there's a semi-decent powder day, which are few and far between. But, they're skiing like kind of bumps where it's boot deep and they really, really are uncomfortable or just flat out don't like it just because they're not used to it.
When you went out west, it's powder everywhere, right?
Oh, well, no, not always, but certainly bigger dumps than we get out here traditionally, yeah. And that was a big learning curve for me when I went out to Revelstoke in British Columbia with a friend. The second time we went out there, we did a day of heli skiing. First time ever doing that, where they helicopter you up.
What was it called? Revelstoke?
Revelstoke is the town, and the resort name is the name of the mountain. It's the highest vertical drop in North America of any other ski resort. It's something like 5,800 feet.
Wow.
With no altitude. Like the summit's only 8,000 feet, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get you get, I mean, that's another, I mean, almost double whiteface for vertical. 40% more, something like that.
So this is it right here?
40%, 70%. Yeah. Yeah, that's it there. And so the summit's only 8,000 feet, so you don't deal with a lot of altitude issues. Mount Mackenzie is the actual name of the mountain. The resort is called Revelstoke. Very challenging to get to in a way. It's about a 5-hour drive from Calgary, 6 hours from Vancouver, so it's kind of in the middle.
Wow.
But they get tons and tons of snow. It's off-piste stuff, which means, you ski down some of those bowls. No real runs. You kind of pick your own line, and there's plenty of groomed runs as well. So we've been out there twice. It's great.
That's what this would be right here.
Yes.
So you could ski down that bowl because it looks like there's actually marks right there.
Yes, you could ski basically in a lot of these places, particularly west. You can kind of ski just about anywhere you want within boundaries. User beware. But these are also places where avalanche control is taken extremely seriously, and they're blasting after big snowstorms and things like that. So,
but this is all open skiing right here. This
pretty
whole
much.
Mountain?
Yep.
So you can get people. Do people go up there and ski off of that?
Yeah. You can go right to the summit.
Wow.
You're not looking. I think that looks like it's a picture from the other side. So the lifts up would be on the other side of that peak. You can kind of see here if you click. That's just the sketch of the trail map. But to put it in perspective, I mean, you take 2 gondolas just to get up to the main lifts. That's how high.
Oh wow!
They have a run from the summit that's something like 9.5 miles long. So it's kind of like skiing from Peru to Plattsburgh, or vice versa.
And that takes you. That would go all the way down. Like that would
all
go
the way
down
back
past
to
the
your
gondolas?
car. Yep, all the way back to your car.
Wow.
And like you said, it's about 5,800 feet of vertical. A lot of people haven't heard of it. It's very reasonable compared to skiing in the States, price-wise, especially with the Canadian exchange rate right now.
So when you say, what were you just saying before about the vertical? So how is vertical calculated? Because that's one thing I never. It's not the height of the mountain. It's just is it the pitch down?
It's in most cases, yes. It's the vertical feet lost from the highest access point of the ski resort to the bottom of the ski resort,
which in theory should show the steepness of it.
Well, no. So because you're not measuring distance, so you wouldn't know pitch without a length of distance.
Okay.
Because it would depend on the run. If you had a 3,000 foot drop in vertical from the top of the summit lift to the bottom, but what if the run's 9 miles long compared to one that's vertical straight down? So you'll get pitches, at some resorts like, some of the diamond or double diamond, which is, the more advanced slopes. I mean, you could easily see pitches that are 40 to 45 degrees, which doesn't sound like much, but it seems pretty vertical when you're on it.
What would Skyward be?
We always talk about that going up. Skyward's tricky because the first 20 yards is very steep.
Yeah.
It intimidates people. That kind of what they call the head wall.
Yeah.
That might be for maybe 20 yards. That might be somewhere in that 40 degree range. If I had to guess.
And then I'd say it probably goes out to about 45, 50?
No.
Maybe less?
I don't think it's going anywhere near that steep. 50 degrees looks like a vertical wall when you're on it.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
No, it doesn't. If you ask contractors or construction guys that know roof pitch and things, a 50 degree slope when you're on it is extraordinarily do you ever watch any of the crazy videos on YouTube, like the Red Bull guys that hike up and ski down these Alaskan, and they literally look like they're skiing down a vertical wall? It's I don't even know how they stay on that without
that's what I was
tumbling.
wondering. It's like this from quite a bit of a drop.
The craziest stuff you'd see might be fit in the 50-something degree range.
Wow.
So 40 degree slope for skiing is quite steep, very steep. Yeah, I don't know if you can pull.
I want to see if they have this point of view, like a point of view of skiing down.
Well, there you go.
Like this.
So that's 50 degrees. It looks like a vertical wall. Even from here, It looks like a vertical wall. That's what I'm saying. 50 degrees. No one's skiing casually down 50 degrees. I mean, no casual resort skier.
Or I should say, no, yeah, I had it wrong. If you go down the wall, the first, like you said, maybe 20 yards of skyward,
maybe
then
40.
It flattens out.
Probably
I was going the wrong way.
Probably 30.
30. Okay. Wow, that's insane.
Maybe, and that's a total guess.
Usually when you see a 45-degree angle, you're like, that doesn't seem that steep. But
I know. It really, really is. When we were out in Alaska,
and there's guys that will ski down that.
There are many, many guys. Not me. Not this guy. I'm too old.
Oh my God. That's
and I wouldn't have done it even when I was young, so I don't know.
How steep is steep?
Yeah, you'll have to. You could do
You're
a
right,
deep, you
yeah.
could do a deep dive, but when you do the real crazy guys that hike up, I mean, you think about the videos watching the guys hike up to those peaks to ski down. They're vertical, basically climbing. They have ice axes and crampons on, and they're basically hiking straight up a.
I mean,
mountain.
look at that. Or this.
Yeah, so that's Corbett's. That's a famous drop run in Jackson Hole. They do a competition there every year, and that's a similar. It's like, I mean, I suppose you could call it Skyward on steroids in a weird way,
God.
just because there's basically a vertical head wall that you
Yeah.
have to drop off into, and then it kind of levels to very steep. But it's there. They build it up till it's a vertical drop in,
Wow.
and they have competitions where guys are doing multiple flips and twists, dropping into it, all crazy stuff.
Have you done anything like? I would consider backcountry skiing considered like an extreme sport? I think it would be at some level.
Well,
Or, I
at
mean,
that
this
level,
would be.
certainly,
Like,
yes.
This
I think around
Casual?
here, no, I don't think you would call that an extreme sport. I mean, I think if you're not comfortable on skis, you'd call it that. But there's a very big scene locally that do a lot. I mean, there's many guys that have skied every high peak, up and
crazy.
down. So no, I don't think it's extreme. I think it's adventurous for sure.
Have you done the high peaks at all?
Oh,
You did
yeah, I've done several.
You did Whiteface, right?
Yep. Well, in that one this time, I actually hiked up and then skied down. But I have skied Whiteface a lot.
So when you hike to the summit of Whiteface, do you just come down the highway part, or do you go?
You can do either.
So you cut over and actually go down.
Well, not technically.
So the result, yeah.
I know people that do.
Yeah.
That would ski up the toll road, hike up over the summit, and then hike down to the resort and do laps there.
Yeah.
I'm usually working out alone, just by my schedule, and I like working out alone.
Yep.
Then the problem comes: how do you get back to your car if you start in one place and end up in another?
Oh,
so I
yeah.
usually try to end up either go up or down the toll road. And
How long is that up the toll road?
from the gate to the castle, where the road kind of ends, is pretty much exactly 5 miles on the nose, 5.0.
And what's the pitch of that one?
Not very.
So it's
in
a
fact,
pretty-
it's a very notoriously boring ski down. Mm-hmm. You have to almost actually be kind of pulling just to keep your speed up in spots. So it seems steep when you're like coming down it on a bicycle or a car, but it is not very steep at all.
So this photo right here, that's obviously the castle or whatever you want to call
Yep.
it up there. So
That's just one of the turns in the road.
So this would go up to that.
Yes.
And then what we see typically from Whiteface is actually on the other side. So the resort would be on this backside?
Yes.
Or this is the backside of the resort?
This is, yes. So that's the side that you don't see any of the ski runs. That's facing the Lake Placid. West.
Yes. Okay.
The ski resort faces kind of northeast.
Correct. Yeah. Because you see it when you get to like Little Whiteface. You look over and you see.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow. That's. What's your favorite ski? Like backcountry skiing or any kind of these, like trails going up?
Locations, you mean? Or,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm impartial to Lion Mountain just because I've done it so many times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I live in Plattsburgh, so to me, I can be skiing in 30 minutes, door to door. It's a good workout. You gain almost right around 2,000 vertical feet going up in like a little under 2.5 miles. So you can be great workout, be up and down in hour and a half, hour 40 minutes. And then it's an hour round trip, door to door drive. So 3 hours from my house back to my house, you can get a pretty good workout in.
What? How long does it typically take going up versus coming down?
Most of my stuff the last year or two has been purposely quite low aerobic
Yep.
stress level. I'm trying to do a lot of what they call zone 1, zone 2. So real keeping a heart rate down low. So I'm certainly not racing up it. And it usually will take me about an hour 15, hour 10 to get up, and then 15 minutes down, something like that.
How quickly can you transition to downhill? Like, can you pull the skins off that pretty quick?
Yeah, so I don't have a race. There's things called like ski mountaineering races internationally. They called shortened to skimo, where they do this mix of hiking in their boots and skinning and skiing down and multiple transitions. Really, really fun to kind of watch if you're into it. I don't have any of these like super fast setups like the racers do.
Yeah.
But I could easily, it's a couple switches on my boots, a couple things to flip on the bindings, and then you rip the skins off and put your helmet on. And I mean, a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. At most.
I was gonna say, because I know there's people that least I know in Vermont, I'm sure other places too, where they skin up and they come down. They just kind of do it over and over again.
Yeah,
It becomes
at
like
resorts.
it's like
Yes.
almost like an endurance kind of.
Yeah, they do. They've done one of the more famous ones in this world, at least, was the last few years, and they've moved it a couple times. I think it's still in New Hampshire. Is basically one of these 24-hour races. I'm not 24-hour races. It's the last skier standing. So it was made. It was made. You're going down.
So it's kind of like a Spartan Spartan race for
way worse, and that's coming from someone. So the one I'm talking about is called The Last Skier Standing, but it was not an original idea. They got the idea from this crazy guy in Tennessee. A lot of people may be familiar with the Barclays Marathon. And so this same guy who did Barclays also created this arguably even more demented race on his property called Big's Backyard Ultra. And now this is running and walking, okay? And so every year, and this is the skiing place got the idea from this Big's Backyard Ultra. And so for the last, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years, there's a couple of documentaries out there about it now.
Of the skiing one?
There is one out there of the skiing one from 2 years ago, where these two guys just kept going for days and days and days. Went for like 3 days, like 90 something hours. And that's it. So you might want to bookmark that. That's worth a watch.
So this one.
So this is what it is.
So they ski up and then just ski down.
And they ski down. Now this is the catch. So let me back up because this is really interesting, and it should be interesting for anybody listening. Go back to the original. So now we're on foot. We're in Tennessee.
Yep.
At this guy named Laz, who invented these crazy screwy runs and competitions.
Have you seen that documentary?
All of them. Yes. Many times.
I've seen a couple.
I'm obsessed with the guy. He came up with this idea called Big's Backyard Ultra. And it's called that because it's literally in his backyard in Tennessee. Okay? So he invited all these ultra runners from around the world, and they start. And basically he came up with a 4.122 something point. Basically a little over a 4-mile loop from his property through the woods, down the road, and back again. Okay? At the top of the hour, the gun goes off, and that entire group of people at any speed they want have to complete that 4.12 something mile loop. So you can run it fast, you can walk it really quick, you do whatever you want. The catch is, at the top of the next hour, you have to be in the starting corral for the gun to go off. And you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again.
Okay.
And as time goes on, people don't finish in time. People don't get out of their camp, and line back up in time. You're eliminated. And the problem is it goes until there's one runner standing. And so, this is most of these people will do laps that'll take them 10 to 12-minute miles. So, you figure they're doing, and the lap at night on this race is slightly different. It's more of an out and back on the road, but it's the same length. It's all a little over 4 miles. Most of these people are doing laps at fastest, maybe 45 minutes it takes them.
Yeah.
And if they're struggling or really need to recover or something, they might be doing 55 or 56-minute laps. So you've got to figure after days that you have never had more than 5 to maybe 12 or 13 minutes to use the bathroom, to sleep, and to eat and drink. Now, you can eat and drink while you're going on the loop, but no one can help you. So if you want to, load it up and get your calories while you're running, but so it has gotten crazier and crazier, and it usually comes down to 2 or 3 people once everybody else has dropped out, and they just keep going, and it becomes totally mental because there's no end. You don't know.
So that one started before the Barkley or after?
After, I believe. I think Barkley's been around for maybe 20, 25 years. I think this has been more in the last 10.
And they're both in Tennessee?
Yeah. Different locations, but all around his house.
Because the Barkley... So... Is called Last Man Standing on that one?
Yeah.
Last Runner Standing?
Last Man Standing, I think.
So
Big's Backyard Ultra is what it's called.
Big's
Backyard. It'll fill in.
Okay.
There you go.
So...
And that's the catch line. 4.167 mile loop. and you can
Looks
see
like, it looks like the same guy.
it is. No, it's
Oh, it is the same guy.
it's the same guy who
Oh,
invented them both.
oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, the
they are,
Barclays
Laz
and
Lake.
Biggs, Laz Lakely. Yep. So this isn't. So if you scroll down, this is how crazy it's become. So in 2020, this famous ultra runner
Oh,
Courtney
jeez.
Delwater went 68 laps, but Harvey Lewis just won it again this year and shattered the all-time record and did 108. So do that math. That's 108 times 4.167. So that's something like 450 miles.
And that's
That's 108
days?
hours.
4 days?
Yeah, right. So it's 24, 48,
Almost
96,
5 days,
almost
nonstop.
5 days without more than a few minutes sleep at any point. And he's not a young guy.
I was going to say, 76?
Yeah, he's 40. He's 2 years younger than me. So he's 47. So yeah, it's really
my
mind blowing. So to bring it back full circle, and there's a few documentaries on Big's Backyard Ultra too. Not quite as well done as the Barclays one, but interesting anyway. So this place in New Hampshire decided to take that same concept to a ski resort and make last skier standing. Same concept. The only
Gotcha.
difference is they have 1 hour to skin to the top of this smallish resort, ski back down to their base camp, and as fast as they want to go, they've got the rest of the hour to recover, and then it's hour after hour. And the same thing happened a couple of years ago. This guy from Utah won it. I can't remember his name, but it was him and this other local kid from like Massachusetts that basically went, I think, over 24 hours just with the two of them left. And the real demented part with Barclays is, so let's say, can you imagine being Harvey? And this is the crazy part, the guy who won it this year and did 108 laps, he can't keep going. It takes two to keep going. The race automatically ends. So the guy he was going with,
107.
they both completed 107. And I'm trying to remember if I think the guy started 108 and then very quickly found he just turned around and was walking back to camp. But Harvey still has to finish the 108 or else no one wins.
Oh.
So he has to finish the last.
So it's kind of like I know I'm going to win, but I still got to, because there's time limit. You
but
still got to push.
And he didn't know necessarily that guy turned around.
True.
You know what I mean? So that's the crazy part
my
mentally is it's just you don't know when it's going to end.
What's his name? Laz again?
Laz.
What is his background? Because
So he was a bit of a competitive runner back in his day when he was young in the, I think, 70s and 80s. The Barclays documentary goes into it a lot. But he's just become this ultra quirky kind of loner that lives semi off the grid in Tennessee. And he based the Barclays off a prison breakout near his house. And actually the Barclays course actually goes under the prison at one point. It goes under this river tunnel under the prison. And basically, I think a guy or somebody or a couple of guys broke out. It might have been in like the 80s from this prison. And they were found like 40 or 60 hours later. And they had only managed to go like a mile or two through it was such
it's kind of like Dannemora here.
Well, right. Except these guys actually got gotaways.
A little bit, yes.
The joke was that it's so hilly and that it's such nasty terrain that after like 3 or 4 days, these guys had only managed to go like 3 miles. And so Laz and his buddies back then said, oh, I bet we could do better than that. And out of that came this really crazy race called the Barclays Marathon. And it's 5 laps, alternating directions of this crazy course. There's something like over 100,000 feet of climbing. The race is closer to like 125 miles long, and there's been only like 15 finishers in like 20-something years.
But the Barclay, the Barclay has a time limit too, right?
Yes, every lap.
Every lap. What's the time for the lap?
I want to say
not
I don't know.
every-
I
it's
don't
definitely
think
not
there's a
every
time
hour,
lap
but-
every lap, but like you have to be done 3 laps. I think within 36 hours, maybe. And then to go on, or else you're pulled at that point.
Yeah, there is a cutoff because I
And
remember.
then I think it's 60 hours to do all 5. And I think it's basically 12 hours a lap is essentially what it is.
And it basically goes. You have to go clockwise during the day, clockwise during the night. Counterclockwise day.
It's nothing to do with it alternates each lap. I don't remember the order, but like let's just say the first lap would go counterclockwise, second lap everyone goes clockwise, then counterclockwise,
So
then
it
clockwise.
might just fall during the day and night because
Exactly.
of time. And I think the last one is they go
It's
opposite.
It's whoever
And they make the choice, and then it's just kind of like back and
whoever
forth.
leaves the camp and starts the fifth lap first gets to choose which direction they want to go in, and then they have to alternate. But there's only been I think there's only been once or twice there's ever been two people to start the fifth lap. That's how challenging it is.
Is that the same thing you have? Well, I mean, in order to win it, you still have to finish the lap.
You have to finish within 60 hours. In fact, there's a really cool documentary on YouTube. What's his last name? Gary.
I think I watched this.
Yeah, the guy misses by 6 seconds. He literally comes in 6 seconds over the 60-hour mark. He's sprinting through this state park.
So wild.
And he's got the big red beard.
Because they do it. So the other reason I know this too is, so I just looked it up. He lives here.
Yes.
They actually do the race in Frozen Head State Park.
Yep. So a little bit east of where he lives.
Because I was just actually in Oak Ridge.
Oh, there you go. So
I have
you
family
weren't
that
far.
lives there, and I would have loved to have gone and just saw where it was, but
Yeah.
I believe it's right here.
Yep.
Now I don't know exactly where there's penitentiary, so
Yeah, that's part of the course. So, yeah, so it's out there, man. It's out there. So he's really, he just goes every possible mental kind of twist that this guy can come up with to make it more challenging mentally. He does.
because they don't know when he's going to start either.
Well, no, they don't know when he's going to start, so you don't know. You can't really sleep, and with the Big's Backyard Ultra race, it's everybody, the guy who ran 450 miles and got second place.
Okay,
Everybody gets a DNF that doesn't win. So he literally
so
ran
cruel.
ran for 5 days and got a did not finish next to his name officially. In the Barclays, you can run. If you finish 3 laps, which doesn't sound like much, but that's roughly 75 miles and 60,000 feet of climbing. And I mean, you could probably count on 2 or 3 hands the number of people that have finished 3 laps. That's called finishing the fun run. That's the fun run. Then they go on to the real race.
I remember and they had people that put in for it and they cut it off. It's only 40 people or something, 30 people.
Well,
that
and
start.
no one knows how to get in. That's the thing. I've got
Yeah.
a couple of good friends that are very elite kind of ultra runners
That's right.
and have been trying forever to get in. And
But they don't even know what to do to get in.
There's no real process. No one really knows. It's all word of mouth. And
It's such a bizarre thing. But
yeah, he's a weird guy.
Well,
Anyway.
switching topics a little bit. Kind of a bunch of different questions here. So I want to start in the. So you put hidden talent would be maximizing efficiency in life, and I'm actually curious because every time I talk to you, I feel like I get some little nugget of a productivity hack or something, whether it be time, life, I don't know, something with your body, but. What do you mean by that? Would be maximizing efficiency in life? How would you?
And I don't know if what did I say that was my hidden talent? I think it's more of a mental defect or disorder. Probably.
Okay.
I
absolutely love it. That's
it's one of. I think it. If I was to reverse engineer it, one of my biggest pet peeves things. I mean, I talk to my family. I have a lot of pet peeves. I'm able to hide fairly well in my business life, but one of the top, probably the top by far, is inefficiency. Period.
Yes.
I travel a ton for work. I have for 10 or 15 years flown. I'm up to 49 states. I think I'll hit my 40th country this summer. I've been really lucky, and I don't like to just say lucky because I've also prioritized it. You and I have talked about that.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
worked at
really
it.
spend money on anything else. I like to travel,
Yeah.
and I made that conscious decision 10 years ago. And so I'm lucky to tick a bunch of countries off for speaking gigs I've done and lectures and things like that. But also my free time, I try to see everything, and I have seen our country. That's one of the big mistakes.
What's the one you haven't been to?
North Dakota, which is really frustrating because I've lived in Minnesota for 7 years, 2 different times, and I 3 hours away from North Dakota. I never made it there.
That's so funny.
So I got to make a trip to Fargo at some point, I guess. But no, and travel industry might be one of the most inefficient historically, and it just drives me bonkers. And the one I just had a big inner brain discussion with a few months ago was one of the most archaic systems on the planet to this day has got to be the rental car industry. the amount of actual paper copies and inefficient just way of doing business car rental companies do. It's, you know it. If you spend any time on the road, it's a race for the rental car counters, because if there's 3 people in front of you, it's a 40-minute wait. The time when everything supposedly has already been filled out online, like I'm super proactive, I'm on the apps and I've got and it doesn't ever seem to matter. You're still waiting and signing papers.
Have you ever done Toro?
Yeah, I think I did once internationally.
Yeah.
But not enough to have an opinion.
We've done Toro. So Toro is basically like the Airbnb for travel cars. So I've used it a couple times. Again, we went to Tennessee for a wedding back in November, and I think my sisters had it, and it was like a whole mess of getting stuff. Now, we've lucked out every time we've had it. It's been seamless. We walk out, they either drop it off for you, or they're like, listen, it's in this parking spot. You grab it. The keys are usually in like a little lockbox thing they have on it, and you jump in, you go.
Yep.
So we've had good luck with it. It's more if you got a pre-plan,
right?
It's like an Airbnb. You just book it prior. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm almost wondering, I would think that process, which seems pretty easy to use, provided there's not like a human error on like the drop off or something, to be pretty effective. The rental car, so you always wonder, we're actually in the middle of watching it's on Netflix, but the Uber documentary, I guess, and how they like came up with Uber, and you're starting to see. He made a good point in the movies, like, so at one point in this whole line, he's arguing with this guy, and this guy's like, you can't do this, blah, 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 and he just screams out, he's like, horse shit, and they're like, what? And he basically looks at him, and he's like, horse shit. He goes, there used to be horse shit and all. So basically he started to talk about the horse and buggy back then. And he said they got rid of it, they went to this mode of transportation, then they went to this mode, then this one, and trolleys became,
right.
So he kind of went through all the line. He goes, basically right now, you guys are trying to save the horse and buggy, and things are changing. This is for Uber, obviously, and now we know how big Uber is. But I'm wondering, when I look at anything like that, when you talk about like inefficiencies, like I would think Toro's just going to eliminate that at some point. I don't know how old Toro is, but
I don't know. Although it was interesting, I was in Marquette, Michigan a few months ago for work, and I actually was in line at this tiny little airport. It's like Plattsburgh.
Okay.
And I'm in line, and same thing. I'm just there to return, and I'm like a gold status with whatever company I was using, and it doesn't matter because there's one young kid working the register, and there's 2 people in front of me. And this guy starts talking to me behind me, who's a real frequent business traveler, and he goes, he actually knows exactly why this industry is. He said the rental car industry, system-wide, and I'm no computer programmer, is basically still using some sort of antiquated software across the board. Like, literally, they've looked into it, and the amount of money years ago, they said there was a system-wide thing to, like, what is it going to cost to upgrade to a modern computerized system? And they basically said it was my argument was like, well, it's not going to get any cheaper the longer you wait. But he was like, it was basically, the guy was insinuating, it was like something like DOS, like they're still running like DOS. And it's very antiquated and stuck.
And this is across all the companies?
Yes, according to this guy, all the major brands were running the same system.
Like, what's the big? Is Hertz the biggest one, or is it Enterprise?
Like I don't know. And I think they're all half co-owned now by,
They're probably the same.
Yeah. You'd have to look that up, actually. That's interesting. You might be something online. I never really thought about it after the guy told it to me, but
the rental
car with the antiquated computer systems, maybe something came up. Yeah.
Rental software.
So anyway,
yeah,
it really drives me insane. So I've tried to create as much efficiency and organization in my personal life, more because it just makes me happy. I think we talked about this maybe the first podcast we did, but it's one of my pet peeves. It's one of the things patients appreciate about coming to my office is I don't run behind schedule.
No, you don't.
And if I am behind, I mean, it's usually because someone showed up late. And I was too nice to kind of say, hey, we're going to have to reschedule, and I squeeze them in.
Yeah.
I mean, if I am more than 5 to 10 minutes behind schedule, it gives me anxiety. I get stressed out. I'm not happy. So
I'm trying to think. I think I've been seeing you once a month for like 10 plus years now.
Has it been that long?
Yeah. And because I went in, it was funny because Gina recommended that I go, and we weren't together at the time. We've been together about 10 years now.
Wow.
So
okay, yeah.
We ended up, I would say in the 10 years, I don't even need a full hand to count, maybe twice. And like you said, it was like,
Yeah.
Or I was late a couple minutes and just missed it, and then someone snuck in. Like it wasn't. I
No,
very
it's
rarely
pretty.
show up.
It's pretty damn efficient,
Yeah,
and
it is.
That's out of purpose. One, we don't overbook,
Mm-hmm.
which it would make sense. A lot of offices clearly do, but I just don't know how some of these docs consistently are running hours behind schedule. I mean, I get stuff pops up, especially in an emergency setting like that, a primary care setting, but when you hear the same stories about the same offices over and over for years,
There's a couple of local ones that unfortunately
that's what
fall in that
exactly
trap,
what I'm
yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
More than a couple, unfortunately. And I don't know. I just couldn't live with myself. I would have an ulcer and a.
What so I think you and I are very similar in a lot of things. Like when you say like maximizing efficiency in life, is there anything that jumps out where you're like, here are little spots that I try to be efficient. Obviously the business aspect. I mean, like your home life. I'm gonna take traveling out for a sec. 'Cause I want to dive into that a bit. But anything you do day to day that like I'm really efficient with this, and maybe any tactics that you use for efficiency or productivity.
Oh boy.
I'll share a couple of mine too, which.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to break it down because I'm such a creature. It's funny, the more you learn about yourself as you get older, I suppose. I would always like to think in my head that I hate routine. Like that's what I like about travel is seeing new places and kind of, new schedule and doing this and being adventurous. Yet when I actually look back at the last like 20 years of my life, I absolutely thrive on a very similar daily routine. And I actually get quite angry. Not even angry is too strong a word. I get anxious when my routine is off, or I get really bummed out easy or ticked off, I guess, sometimes with family stuff. I get up at the same exact time every day. I like my coffee. I like this. And I guess there's comfort in routine.
Yeah.
And even when I travel, my wife's similar in a lot of ways with that case. We end up with, and like a lot of couples do, you just end up, maybe your routine's a little different, but man, by the end of that vacation, we've got our routine down for that particular place we're in.
Nice.
And so I think it's just for me mentally, I mean, you could almost, you wouldn't be the first person to say I may be a little bit on the spectrum in certain ways of my life. I think it just brings me, I won't even say pleasure because I have a pretty high bar with that. I'm a pretty even Steven. I don't get too happy or excited about things, but I try not to get too bummed. I try to stay pretty even keel. But I think that's out of necessity how I've organized my life is to be very routine and prompt and organized.
Have you ever heard the quote? It kind of goes what you're saying. I think it's Jocko Willink that talks about discipline equals freedom. Have you ever seen the books and stuff? And and obviously he puts it in a different context, but when you break it down, kind of the same thing. You're disciplined, which gives you the freedom, I think, in a lot of other. Because think about if you weren't disciplined in your day to day and had a routine, it probably wouldn't allot the time for you to go travel and be spontaneous.
That's right.
So I think there's a level of I'm same thing, kind of a creature of habit. I'm very particular.
Yep.
My wife would say that. I'm sure the girls here would say that. I'm very neat. I'm very organized. A level of OCD of stuff, but I feel like a lot of the things I do serve the purpose of the short delayed gratification to have longer gratification. What I mean by that is I will take extra time to make sure I take the couple seconds to go put something back where it should go versus where the hell is it? I'm searching for it. Where do we put the keys? Where do we put this or whatever? And I'm like, I know where it is because it's got a home. It's got a place. Yeah. And people would be like, oh, you're whatever. And I'm like, in my brain, it's not that it bothers me that it's there. I'm using an example of, let's say you have keys. If someone takes the keys and throws them on a table that doesn't, it's just kind of a catch-all, whatever. And we know the keys maybe go on a hook. Yep. I will grab the keys and put them on the hook, not because it annoys me where the keys are. It's because if it's not there, I know I can just catch it. I'm like, my brain just is wired like, put it back so we know that it's there when you need it. And then when the time comes, you don't think about it.
And it's a very big challenge, one that I'm sure family would argue I lose most of the time, is the patience with people that are not like that. And not even for better or worse, but it's for worse in my brain because I wouldn't be the way I am if I thought there was a better way.
Yeah.
You know, so even as much as like I have my spot on the couch.
Yep.
And it's on the one end because it's where my computer's plugged in, and my phone charger's there, and my little blue light I sometimes use in the morning to plug in, like in the middle of winter, the first few minutes if I'm playing like Wordle or something. And it really annoys me. I always know when I show up and I'm like, all right, first of all, whose charger is this? This isn't, you know, and I like to like, I'm joking, not joking, is I honestly, guys, I have like 6 square feet of this house. This is my reading lamp is right there. Everything is set up exactly where I like it. And I go, just try not to mess with this one corner if it can be.
Would you consider yourself a minimalist?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. I would think you would be,
Yes.
but then some people I know like collect stuff, and I'm always less is more. I like clean lines. I like less. Like there's a reason there's nothing on the walls here. And this actually, eventually, I know I've been saying this for a while, just life, it's been hard. The table is in the process of being made, and this will be much more cleaned up.
Yeah.
So like the legs are there. So even with this little bit of stuff back there, I'm still like, God, it just doesn't look like it should. But everything is very clean. Like I know, like you could look at the way I patterned these. Like this is the same height as that, and it's like it's minimal stuff, but I just like the attention to detail.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I have, I guess you might say collect is kind of some of my gear. Mm-hmm. So, you know, but even that I've trimmed down. Like I've got a couple of bicycles, you know, a mountain bike and a fat tire bike. That's all I have. I used to have 4 or 5 different stupid bikes, you know. I've got, excuse me, I've got, you know, a couple, 3 or 4 pairs of skis, but again, they all do different things. It's not like I have 4 pairs of skis to go to Whiteface. But that would be the most. I mean, it's you've seen my desk. It's an IKEA desk with no drawers.
Yep.
It's literally a plank, and I have some
sort
of. It's got a laptop and
a little
light,
radio.
And no, not even on my desk.
Oh, it's not on your desk?
No.
Wherever it plays music, yeah.
Yeah, that's over on the bookshelf. But yeah, very minimalist. I absolutely hate clutter with a passion.
Yeah.
And just like you said, it gives my mind less things to think about.
Well, that's one of them. And the other thing, too, and I got this from, I didn't do this because of this guy, but when I started realizing, I'm like, I kind of do it for the same reason. Steve Jobs wore the same thing every single day.
Yeah.
That was like, he was very famous for that.
Yeah.
And
so
it wasn't.
Obama was known
Was the same thing? Yeah.
Well, he had some paraphrasing, but he had some quote, you know, it's just one less decision he has to make every day. Everyone is a charcoal suit, and it was with a white shirt.
Yeah.
And
well, I started doing that, so I have a couple of the same pants and a couple of the same shirts. Same style. They're literally about 2 of them because they fit. I liked them, and I just rotate them every single day. So for me to pick out an outfit every day, it is very takes almost no time. But I think it came back to the decision fatigue, where I'm like, I just don't want to think about it, and that's why I eat the same thing for breakfast. That's why like it's just a creature of habit. But part of me is. It's like I just don't want to have to think until I have to think, and I'm also saving that energy bubble.
Yeah, so I have something a little different. Is that in the winter and fall, I usually wear what I have on now.
Yep.
Like khakis. I'm going to talk about work now.
Yeah.
Is sweater vest, not sweater vest. I'm sorry, a V-neck sweater and some dress pants, and I have them folded in a closet, and I might have 7 or 8 that I rotate through.
Yeah.
But when I put it, it goes on top. So I always know I'm pulling from the bottom. So there's no thinking. So I basically wear 95% of the time you're going to see me on the same day.
Yeah.
I'll have the same sweater on. I have like 7 or 8 of them that I rotate, but I stack them. And then in the summer, I like golf shirts. And same thing. It goes back on the left. And so I pull from the right. And so, yeah, it's very crazy. It's all of it. But I have found my life runs better when I have a very strict habit that I stick with. So for instance, I had a run that ended, the only thing that stopped it was probably one of the worst cases of food poisoning I've ever had in Rio. Back in actually I'll tell you exactly when it was, because it was like the week before COVID hit. It would have been middle 3rd week of February or something. I had a workout streak. Working out every single day, and I think it was around 7 years I didn't miss a day of working out. And I have never been, even though I was in my 40s for most of that streak, early 40s. I've never been fitter, leaner, in better shape than I was during that. The minute that streak broke, and I tried the day, and I just was, it was bad. The streak broke, and ever since then, so for the last, and part of that had to do with COVID, like everybody just getting that first summer in particular, just eating and drinking too much and sitting around too much and nothing open. But I got out of the habit. And so I still worked out, I would say more than 90% of people, but I would get lazy where I'd go a couple of days and not work out. And so this was, and I've done the same thing over the years with diet stuff. Like I usually, when I was coming after grad school, I started challenging myself, like just like a lot of people, but with resolutions for New Year, I would just pick something I don't need to be eating and try to give it up for the year. And so one time it was French fries.
Okay.
Nothing, no fried, and I don't eat onion rings. So it was French fries. And for me, they're okay, but I just eat them out of habit because they come with so many things.
Yep.
I did the year, ended up going like 5 or 6 years. I didn't have a fry. And so I kind of thrive. Cold showers were another thing.
Okay.
The purported benefits to be determined. There's some interesting stuff with possible immunity advantages. I do it totally just because it sucks. And it's a really good mental check.
Yep.
I think there is something to kind of ambient temperature as well. Like I think that cold bathroom does not feel cold after you've done a minute plus of ice water to finish a shower. And I had just along the same run with the workout streak I had like a 5-year streak where I finished one shower every day on ice water, the coldest setting.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same as making your bed first thing in the morning. It's just a mental win. And I'm not that. Thank God my wife is more obsessed with the bed than I am.
See, I would think you'd make the bed.
No.
I've made my bed every day since a kid.
Yeah, no, and she
Always
beats
have.
me to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe I would. I've been not gone, she's great. So I never really have to worry about it. And she's got her own little things like that. But yeah, it's just, I think more people would be better just setting a low bar.
Yeah.
But a consistent bar. That's it. It's showing up, day after day after day. You don't have to be killing it every day. Just showing up. I mean, look at my career even. It's hard to believe this is the start of my 24th year of practice. It's one of my, and this might open up a thing of worms here, but it's probably my most proud work accomplishment, and people don't believe me. So I finished 23 years was the end of December. So that's my start of my 24th year. I have never, ever missed a day of work in 24 years. Not a single day. I don't get sick, knock on wood.
Yeah.
Somehow I've never had COVID. Been in my house 6 times.
Wow.
6 separate times. I've never tested positive. If I've had it, I didn't have a sniffle or anything, but I've tested a ton.
What do you think that attributes to?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think clearly I'm lucky enough to have an above average immune system.
Yeah.
Because I honestly don't even remember the last time I had like a stuffy nose.
Wow.
I remember the last time I was truly sick, and it was some sort of a flu or whatever. It was 1997, and I was just talking about this with someone. I was in grad school. I was in chiropractic school in Minnesota, and it was the NFC Championship game, the year the Vikings played the Falcons. You remember that? You're probably too young to remember the
97?
Icky shuffle. Might have been 98.
Oh God, I remember.
Might have been the winter of 98. 97, 98.
It was a championship game?
But they lost at home. The Vikings had a chance to go to the Super Bowl, and they lost to the Falcons and at home. Anyway, long story short, a bunch of us college buddies were going to try to tailgate. It was like a noon game. So we were up 20 below. We're up at 8 in the morning.
January?
I just remember, too, when you're that age, swinging into whatever liquor stores open on a Sunday at 8 in the morning and finding, we're thinking we're tailgating and we're going to try to get some scalp tickets in the nosebleeds. And I just remember drinking I remember exactly what it was. It was blackberry brandy mixed with Mountain Dew. To be 20 again. And standing outside for hours in the cold, drinking that, and we never could get tickets. And I remember going back home and I fell asleep for a bit, woke up, and I was just like pooped warmed over. That's the last time I've really been sick. And it was just basically a bad cold for a couple of days.
Probably self-inflicted, standing
Oh
outside.
yeah. Well, whatever, and living the college lifestyle too, up late and partying and whooping it up. But so I have a big immune, but I have two things I've come to actually answer your question. Number one, and one of them, half your audience or more might think I'm crazy, but they may all think I'm crazy actually. But the two big things, and I give no evidence, so don't, I'm not gonna. You can call me, I'm gonna bro science it up here or anything, but my biggest bad habit my entire life since I was a little kid was I'm a pretty bad fingernail chewer.
Okay.
COVID was the first time I actually used a pair of nail clippers in my life. Like I gave up chewing my nails when COVID hit, just out of just sanitary, whatever. And I've kind of slipped back again into if I'm watching TV or nervous or something about, preoccupied, I'll find myself chewing my nails or picking my nails more so now.
Okay.
I think there is something to be said for slow dripping germs from like 2 years old on with my fingers constantly in my mouth. That's one of my theories. I don't know if there's any immunologists
Do you get
in the crowd.
canker sores or anything?
No, never. Nothing.
Wild. I've had two really bad ones this year to the point where I had to get like medication.
Never had one, and not that I ever remember.
Wow.
So nothing. But I think there's something to that. And you look today, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with allergies, but something's going on. My wife's a school nurse. She sees all this stuff. I'm not that old.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even 50 yet, and I don't remember a single kid in school having a deathly peanut allergy or any kind of allergy.
I don't either.
There certainly were no separate tables. There were certainly never, and that's in like the 80s,
when did food allergies?
I don't know.
Because I feel like they've become like, and again, I know people have had celiacs longer too, but like the idea of celiacs, gluten, dairy, all this stuff, like it's really, I don't remember it in high school.
No.
And that was 15 years ago, so I feel like it's...
And if you trace it back, and again, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole because it's controversial and no one really knows with 100% certainty, and nutrition and stuff in foods and chemicals and all this. It's probably multifactorial like everything is. Everything's complicated, right? But it definitely wasn't around back then.
I remember
and it wasn't the 40s here. We're talking about like the 80s and early 90s.
I was 2000s. I don't remember it at all.
No. And so, but if you lumped all of those in under one umbrella, there's certainly some sort of an autoimmune problem. You know what I mean? If you look at the peanut stuff and the gluten and the celiac and all this stuff, it all falls under some sort of thing where your body is attacking itself inappropriately. Now, why that is, who knows? But so that's theory one of why I've been lucky enough to never get sick.
Okay.
And number two, and the science is actually starting to back me up a little bit on this with the connection. And Huberman, are you a Huberman guy? You listen to him time to time like I do?
A little bit more now than I have ever have. But
I
yeah,
agree.
still
And
getting into him. Sometimes he's
I-
very dense for me too because he's a smart dude.
He is. And one of my negatives with him is I wish he wouldn't go down that bro science.
Yeah.
Sometimes he does with little evidence. I think he overplays some of the supplement
I think it's
stuff
just
he
for
talks
content.
about.
Yeah.
Because he clearly is. A tenured guy at Stanford and a PhD and all this. Clearly a smart dude. And with my background in the science, I like the dense of his, but I could certainly see it being a problem. But anyway, he's talked about this a couple times with some of his guests. Is this more and more research pouring out with the connection between the brain and immunity?
I actually wrote down neurological to skeletal muscle because there was another question I had after. But yeah, speak on this first.
So science is finally starting to catch up, and it's not just immunology; it's everything that the brain is driving everything in the body. And we used to like to say everything was just categorized. You have your muscles, you have your immune system, you've got your endocrine system, you've got your gut biome and your gut health and all this. And now there's just a neurology link and a brain link to all of them, and they're all interconnected. And so my thing for a lot of years has been mentally overcoming potential illness. Now, that sounds really woo-woo and weird, but let me just make it really simple for you. So, for instance, what do almost everybody do? You wake up tomorrow morning.
Yep.
And you're not even out of bed yet, but you're maybe a little stuffy, or you swallow and your throat's a little bit sore or tickly, what is literally the first thought that passes through?
I'm sick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, great. Here we go. I can't afford. I got a big
Coming
meeting.
down with
I've got
something.
the kids are going to get sick. We're going on a trip in this weekend. It's always the first thought that passed through your head, and it's just historically, I always thought it was just a mind matter kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the science is starting to prove there's some link there, and you have to believe it. Just thinking the thoughts and then saying, "Oh, I didn't mean that." I don't count. So I truly believe, and I've been thinking, for probably 20 plus years, is if I wake up and I feel a little bit off, I do not even let that thought pass. It's just an excuse. I must have slept with my mouth open, or I'm just thirsty, or just I must have slept on my side or something, and then I'm fine. It's fine. Mm-hmm. I never let that thought of being sick be sick. Now, in 20-something years of private practice, I've seen thousands of patients, and for better or worse, you get to see a lot of different personalities in private one-on-one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we all know those people in our lives that are the opposite of that are constantly sick. Mm-hmm. And there tends to be a common theme with a lot of them, is it's self-perpetuating. You know what I mean? Like you get sick once or twice, and then you suddenly are becoming this expected to get sick kind of personality. And I think there's something to that.
It's not the first time I've heard that, and I've heard other people say, like, I don't get sick. And when you said that, I'm like, I've heard people say that. This is people I know.
Yeah.
These are people I might have heard in an interview or whatever. And they typically follow up with that. It's like, I just tell myself I'm not sick.
Right.
But it's the same thing. Believe it. Like you said, whatever that hits, it's one of those where it's just like, I'm not sick.
Yeah.
It's excuse. It is.
Yeah. And there's people that, of course, that say that, and you can tell immediately that they're horribly sick as they're saying that to you.
Yeah. But most of these people are like you saying to me right now. They're like, I just don't get sick because I just don't believe I'm ever sick. And but they say the same thing, and they're like, there's one example of a guy, I remember saying this in an interview, and he said the same thing. And he said I'd never get sick, but it was probably the same thing, 20-something years of never getting sick. He's like, he goes, when it happens, or if I don't feel good, I just talk myself out of it. I just get on with my day, and I'm fine.
Yes. Yeah. And so I know that sounds wacky to a lot of people, and I'm not saying, obviously, if you had cancer or, God forbid, something like that, you outthink that. But I'm just talking in general for most of the little bugs.
What do you think 99% of the population
exactly is? I think there is something to a positive outcome. And, living life, too. I mean, I also, all that stuff I said, chewing my nails and thinking positively about not getting sick is one thing, but I also like to think I take care of myself. I work out most days.
You get outside.
I eat right 90% of the time. I get out quite a bit. I'm outside every day, at least a little bit. So there's something obviously to that as well.
I was going to say because you see it a lot with exercising too. When someone says like, I can't exercise today because I am too sore or I don't feel good enough to exercise. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I'm not that strong-willed where I force. I've done it a couple times, but people that are, I'm going to force myself when I'm sick to work out, or when I'm hungover, I'm going to go work out, or whether I'm one of those people. If I don't feel good, I don't work out. I probably should, but most people that have said that's what they do, typically say once you start working out, whatever feeling, soreness or sickness or whatever goes away, and you're right into it. Yeah. And then usually you come out on the other side, and you're like, I'm fine. Yeah. So again, have you ever done that before?
Yeah.
Just kind of like you said, obviously 7 years of, but.
Yeah, I mean, I probably in 7 years, woke up a little stuffy or something. I don't recall, but I don't think. I think, in fact, we may have talked about this last time, but I think one of the biggest mistakes, just general mistakes people make, and I see it week in and week out of my office with exercise in general, is working out too intensely too often.
Especially if you're just starting.
Well, period, though. I mean, for anybody. I mean, I can look at very elite, age group athletes that just feel like if they're not really hitting it hard, it doesn't really count, and don't take nearly enough real easy recovery days. All of their workouts are at that kind of moderately hard to hard level, and you can't get away with it forever, particularly as you get older.
What I was going to say for you now, with what you've seen, obviously experienced at your age, like what do you think is a good balance, or what would you say, like, hey, if you're in let's say a month or a week, a month, or a year, however you want to say it, like what percentage of the time do you think could be at kind of a harder day where you're like, I feel like I'm pushing myself today versus a recovery day versus maybe just something that's kind of baseline maintenance?
Okay. Now you're opening up a can of worms.
I knew you'd go.
This is. I mean, we could do 20 hours on this and not even scratch the surface. But let me see if I can break it down easiest for you. So, number one, in a way, because this has become my new obsession, is longevity.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of deep diving with just how to kind of optimize longevity and my visits to this island in Greece, one of the blue zones, the last 3 summers. I've had this a bit of an obsession with this, and not the junk stuff out there. There's plenty of podcasters that are spewing a lot of information that's a little over the top. But what do we know? Number one, it depends on your goal. Are you a 20 or 25-year-old guy or girl? And maybe you're just trying to maximize, you don't give a crap about longevity or heart health at your age, you're invincible, right, quote unquote, and maybe you want to look good naked. That's the phrase everybody says: lean body mass, minimize body fat. That workout routine is going to look a lot different than someone who's 55, has 3 kids, full-time job, and is more looking to maximize health and well-being, right? Heart health, longevity, things like that. For the younger person that's looking to get lean, that's going to be a lot more resistance training heavy. What we know for a fact that one of the best predictors of lifespan is VO2 max. Okay. So you've heard that phrase before. Yep. Which is thrown around, but it's basically what's the maximal volume of oxygen that you can move in and out of your body.
So you see them running with the mask on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things. Yes. And they're looking at amount of CO2 you're blowing off when you exhale, oxygen in, and they check a bunch of different stuff as well. But VO2 is directly correlated with longevity. The higher your VO2 max, the longer you tend to live. And so there are a couple kind of much smarter people than me in this field that I follow. And one of the guys tweeted or X'd or whatever you're calling it now, a few days ago that said, I'm trying to think about exactly how he phrased that, but it was something like it should be, he basically was stressing that it doesn't take a whole lot of time to maintain muscle mass, especially as you age. Yep. But you need a lot of time in low-level aerobic exercise to maintain VO2.
Which is zone 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mainly. Now, you can do hard occasionally, very rarely, but the way to increase VO2 is, unfortunately, a lot of time spent in a low-level aerobic state where your heart is working slightly harder than normal, but for extended, like several hours per week.
Okay, gotcha. So like a normal day, maybe we're closer to an hour, 45 minutes to an hour?
Or longer.
Okay.
Yeah, or longer. I've seen it all over the board, but someone, some of these guys I read is, saying as much as, 7 to 10 hours a week in zone 1 or 2 to maximize kind of VO2. Now, you're going to lose VO2 as you age naturally, like everything. Your lean muscle goes down, your muscle size goes down, testosterone drops. But VO2, the better you can preserve that seems to be linked with longevity. And it's difficult to change. It just is. Just to give you some numbers. Yeah. So my VO2, and again, I just use my stupid Garmin, which gives me a rough estimate. I haven't been on a treadmill officially tested, but I think it's probably close enough for our purposes. In the last year or two, mine will go, it's usually in the upper 40s to about 50. Okay. Which, according to, depending on whatever resource, is certainly better than the vast majority of 49 or 50
What's the typical
year olds.
range of VO2?
So if you took an average 40 or 50-year-old person, let's just say guys are going to be a little higher than women, considering just bigger size on average. And you know the obesity rate. Yeah. I would be willing to bet an average 40-something-year-old guy in the U.S.'s VO2 is probably in the 20s, maybe 30. Okay,
And then-
remember mine was pushing,
So you're probably double.
and I'm not even some freaky aerobic athlete.
Yeah.
I was a sprinter decathlete through college, so I was always more of a sprinter jumper. So it's not like I'm one of these gifted, Tour de France guys.
Yeah.
Now you get the elite, so the highest VO2 numbers ever recorded tend to be in cross country skiers.
Okay.
There's some outliers as well. There's been a few cyclists. There was a guy who won the Pikes Peak Marathon like 12 times back in the 90s. But the highest ever recorded is usually in the low 90s, which is obscenely high.
Wow.
I'm talking about not even a 1/10 of 1%. I'm talking about a millionth. Armstrong's at his peak when Lance was winning, Tour de France. And again, pharmacology aside,
Yeah.
he was probably in the mid to upper 80s, I think I've read. So it's a huge swing.
So let's take someone that's up at that level. What do they experience? Like, what would they experience that's different than us? Like, ability to work out longer, ability to just breathe clearer. Like, what's the benefit of having the VO2? Like, how it translates to like a feeling someone might actually have?
That's a hard question.
Because then I always think like, we talk about this when I go in, and I'm like, I'm on a streak of stretching, or like I haven't stretched in a long time, and I feel like right now I feel like absolutely stiffer than a board. But when I'm stretching, I typically like get up in the morning with no issue. I don't feel stiff. Everything moves. Everything feels more like lubricated and feels a little bit more like jelly, which feels awesome. But VO2, like again, my knowledge of VO2 is very low. I kind of understood what it was, but I don't.
So performance is really complicated and multifactorial. You have things, just to even keep it simple, you have the VO2 max. You have something called, what is your lactate threshold, right? And then just everything even down to like perceived effort, right? Like at a scale of 0 to 10 or 0 to 20, that just some people can suffer much longer and much harder than other people can suffer.
And that would be more mental than
exactly.
Yep.
So it's wide ranging.
Okay.
I've heard the analogy used that VO2 is the size of the glass. So the bigger the number, the bigger the glass. If you think of a fitness level, aerobic fitness, that the VO2 gives you a higher bar. Now, it doesn't matter. You could have a really high VO2, but if you're poor in some of these other factors, your lactate threshold is quite low, blah, 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 you might not be a top performer just with a high VO2 in and of itself. Okay. But getting back to that, my point was, we do seem to, it seems to be pointing that if the higher you can get your VO2, the better your chance of living long. That seems to be correlated. So I think people hear a lot, rightfully so, that as you age, you're getting into your 40s, 50s, 60s and up, that muscle mass is one of the things you lose the fastest, and it absolutely can be. But I'm going to counter that with, you can maintain or even gain muscle mass in as little as like 30 to maybe 60 or 90 minutes a week of strength training. Yeah. Like literally a couple of sessions of 30 to 45 minutes is enough.
Think about how many people lift when they're younger, and when they're older, it still looks like they lift, and they haven't lifted in 20 years. They just can keep some kind of level. Yeah, even myself, like I still have a little bit more muscle mass, even though I haven't lifted much in like 7 years.
No, and I'm in the same boat. I have just mentally, since COVID hit, the gyms were closed for a while, got out of the habit. And I was never a huge lifter, but I used to like going in 3 days a week, and then I do something in aerobic the other 4, and I just get out of the habit. And I've really been struggling since mentally, just because I like being outside. Yeah, like today, I could have easily, probably should have gone up, could have afforded to go to the gym, hit the weights for 45 minutes to an hour. But I'm like, do I want to go in a stinky gym, or do I want to go throw the skis in the back and be out in the woods? Yeah. And
by yourself, nice day. Yeah.
Perfect world, I think if I could get in twice a week and do some real intense strength training, and then the other 5 days a week doing some lower level, long aerobic type activity, that's probably the best of both worlds. So the point being, it does take time to maintain or to grow and increase your VO2. But it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't in fact be hard. And that's the big thing with these people, is they feel, and it's great for my business because they're hurt constantly. Yeah. But you get these people that are oftentimes severely overweight, this time of year in particular, right? Their resolutions come out, they're at the gym, or they feel like they need to run, right? There couldn't be a worse sport for someone who's carrying extra weight than running. Yeah. It's just, in normal recreational runners that you would think most of them not obese are somewhere in the ballpark of 80% injury rate in a calendar year. So even the people that are used to running are getting hurt at obscene rates. And so now try doing that with an extra 50 to 100 pounds on your body. You don't stand a chance. And the thing is, it doesn't take much to get the heart rate up. And the irony is when you're carrying a bunch of extra weight and you haven't worked out, or you haven't worked out in years, you don't have to do very much. A fast walk or getting on the stationary bike or standing on the elliptical is enough to get that heart rate up well up into zone 1 or 2. And you don't need to be killing it and killing yourself more so.
Is zone 1 and 2, that's relative to the person too?
Yes. So
like a fitter person can push it more and would still be in the same zone relative to their...
Okay. So this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Yes. So just, and again, I know I'm very oversimplifying, but this is enough to at least give your listeners an idea of what we're talking about. You have to know what your rough max heart rate is. Okay. Now, the old thing we always learned growing up is the 220 minus your age.
Yep.
It's a horribly inaccurate, but it gets you, even if you just wanted to use that just to get, I mean, you might be off 10 beats a minute, but who knows? But max heart rate decreases with age. That's why that formula
doesn't
work.
Oh,
that's why it works.
Work,
I mean,
yes.
It's 220 minus your age. So a 20-year-old max heart rate's going to be in the ballpark of 200. Now, I always just, for whatever reason, genetically, just always ran a little high. So when I last tested my max heart rate, which is often done in a race, like if you do a 5K or a 10K, take a look at the last like 15, 20, 30 minutes of that race as hard as you could possibly go. That average is probably going to be close to your max. Whatever you're hitting as you come across the finish line. So even in my 30s, I was pushing 200 for running. And that's the other thing. Cycling max heart rate's a little different than your running max heart rate and skiing max heart rate. But even if you want to just take the 220 minus age, another one you hear is 205 minus half your age. Just 220 minus your age. Roughly, and this even varies a little depending on the resource, but zone 1 and zone 2, now that's assuming a 5-zone system. Okay, 1 being the easiest, barely above rest, 5 being all out, close to your max heart rate, 95+% of your max heart rate. Zone 1 is going to be around 55 to 65% of your maximum heart rate.
Okay.
So if you're 220, let's say you're a 40-year-old, you're at roughly a ballpark of 180 would be your max heart rate.
Yep.
So 50% of 180 is 90. So you figure you're talking probably in that 100 to 130, 120 range would be zone 1 and 2.
So this might be like a brisk walk.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if you're out of shape or obese or both. Right?
Yep.
I mean, they might hit that going up the stairs. To the
true.
second floor.
Yeah, you're right.
Depending on how out of shape they are, and there's it just is what it is.
Yep.
And so and this is what I've been doing for years, because it's one of the big problems is people go out and feel like they have to beat themselves up working out, and they're sweating and they're breathing hard and wonder why they're hurt after the first 3 weeks. Is if you can roughly ballpark what is the top end of your zone 2. So if you want to say 70 to 75% of your max heart rate, I'd even err on the low end, say 70%.
Okay.
Of whatever your 220 minus your age, 70% of that number, you should never get over that.
So that ends up being what, 240?
No.
Or sorry, 140, I mean?
I don't
70%
know. Calculate
of-
if it's figure 40-year-old, the max
10%.
heart rate's 180. That's 18 is 10%. So you're talking, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100,
So you're 130.
120. You're talking, 120 something.
Yeah.
Is the hardest your heart should be working to stay in zone 1 or 2. And a lot of people don't want to hear that.
I was going to say, because that's less intensity than you think.
Way less.
Yeah.
And so what I've been doing personally, I have my little Garmin watch that I do everything with. I have it if I'm hiking, if I'm backcountry skiing, if I'm doing any of that stuff aerobically, biking, I have it set. I know my top of my zone 2 is around 143.
Okay.
It's a little higher than them, but I've tested it. Okay. So I have an alarm that starts beeping when I hit 143.
To tell you to slow down.
Yeah, I stop.
Or intensity.
Yeah, I just stop. If I'm hiking up a mountain and it starts beeping, I look down, I'm at 148. I stop for 30 seconds, a minute, let my heart rate drop down into like the 120s, and then I'll start up again. And it's very hard for me because I'm used to pushing it. But what was eye-opening when people start, and I've trained a lot of people over the years with this approach, it's boring. It's slow at first. It's a little frustrating for people. Is that they find it ultimately quite enjoyable that they're now finishing a workout. They're going out for an hour on their bike, or they're doing an hour on the elliptical, and they feel better when they finish than when they started.
Yeah.
They're not dying. They're not limping around the next day because they're so beat up, and the injury rate plummets.
And the frequency of working out increases.
You can do that, yes.
Yeah.
You can do that day in and day out. I'd mix up the activities. I wouldn't do the same activity, obviously. But this is what gets frustrating, particularly with runners. I treat a ton of runners, and they're stubborn as a population. They're hard-headed, and they're very habit-driven, most distance runners.
Yep.
And the problem they don't want to hear is that for a lot of quote-unquote fit age group people that have been running for years but have never developed this aerobic base,
Yep.
is that to stay in zone 1 and 2 for them is going to involve a lot of walking.
So
A lot of walking.
yeah, so a lot of these people, it's kind of like just banging their head into the wall because it's lack of knowledge. Because I look at, I think you can kind of break down most people that work out into runners, CrossFit variation, and then probably your bodybuilders kind of guys that just do mostly lifting.
Physique, yeah.
Yeah, physique. So like when you look at all of them that are all different, each of them have a level of, especially if it's someone that goes a lot, they kind of build that tolerance up, and then you do get a baseline. But I do think for all of them, there's a mixture of habit, there's a mixture of ego, and there's a mixture of, what do you want to call it? Like routine, but routine of I don't want to not do it. Because people almost like get into a sickness, like mentally, like I got to work out, I got to do this, I got to do that.
Yep.
And
don't get me wrong though, too, because you could still be a very high performing person. You could have gone out and I did my 3 hour and 30-minute marathon or sub 3:30 age group, or look at me years ago, but doing a few different Lake Placid Ironmans, never having spent any time training that aerobic base. I was able to fake it, but it's not that you can't do a really high performance with it. It's what is it doing to your body, number one. Are you breaking yourself down because the effort level is so high every time? And or are you just really limiting your ultimate potential by not developing that aerobic base? So can I give you a little analogy? Because this will make sense.
Yeah.
So the first thing I do when I train people, I haven't had much time lately, but I'm looking to kind of maybe grow that side of things again. We can talk at the end, but is basically I require a several month commitment because I go, this isn't going to change overnight, and you're not going to like me, and you're going to think it's boring because I'm going to have you have been running and want to improve your marathon. And now all of a sudden you're finding to stay in the right heart rate zone, you're having to walk for a minute every 2 or 3 minutes just to keep your heart rate low. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
So this is what I have people do is once we have the top of your zone 2, the hardest you should be working to stay in zone 2, right? Let's just use a number. Let's just say 140 beats a minute.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, 140. I'm going to have you go to a track so that it's a flat, no hills, a set distance. And I am going to have you complete 2 or 3, doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. Let's just say you're going to go 3 miles as fast as you can do it, but never letting your heart rate go higher than 140 or whatever the top of your zone 2 is. So you can start running. The minute you hit 141, you're walking until it drops below it. Then you can run. So it's this crazy mix of short jogs and then power walking. And what you do is you finish that 3 miles, you write the time and what your average heart rate was. So let's just say by the time it was all said and done, your average was 137.
Okay.
And let's say it took that 3 miles, shockingly to you, since you've run a 3 hour and 40-minute marathon, it took you 12-minute miles. Okay? Let's say it took you 36 minutes to do 3 miles with your heart rate under 140.
Okay.
that shows you the complete lack of true aerobic base that you have not developed, because your heart rate immediately is in zone 3 and 4 when you quote unquote are going out for an easy run.
Yep.
Your heart rate is elevated. Now this is where it gets interesting. So you've done that initial test. You did 3 miles. Your average heart rate was 137, 138, and it took you 36 minutes to finish those 3 miles, keeping your heart rate under 140. Now you start doing 5, 6, 7 days a week of this zone 1, zone 2 training, whether it's walking, elliptical, walk, jog, whatever it is, but you can't get that heart rate over. You take a month, 2 months, 3 months of developing this aerobic base, as frustrating as that is. We then go and retest. This is the number. So now you're going to do the same 3 miles, keeping your heart rate as close to 140 as you can without going over. You do that this time. You finish your 3 miles 3 months after the initial test. Heart rate's still the same. Let's say it's 137, 138 was your average, but now you did it in 27 minutes. You've now cut 9 minutes off your running time at the same effort. That's the key. Do you follow?
Gotcha.
My heart rate is effort, right? The lower your heart rate, the easier the effort. Again, I'm simplifying, but in general. So at the same effort, which is a zone 2 effort for you, easy, relatively comfortably easy, you have now run the same distance significantly faster. That's how these crazy freak, mainly Kenyan and East African marathoners, Kipchoge, these guys pushing 2 flat for a marathon. That's 4 hours and 37. I'm sorry, 4 hours. 4 minutes and 37 mile pace. 4:37 pace for 26 miles. Okay, wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
How do you even do that? Because the aerobic bases these people have, that he can run a sub 5 minute mile for 2 hours, and his heart rate might only be at like 160 something. Do you see what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
That's the beauty
by
of
him
zone 2.
increasing it, his effort, even though it looks fast to us, is not hard to him.
Exactly right. His
Gotcha.
speed continues to grow at the same effort. Because if you're going for 2 hours, you can't be in zone 5 for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You can't. Okay? By definition, you can't.
Yeah.
A few minutes at most. And so to go there, these guys have to be running 440 miles in zone 3 or 4 to go for 2 hours straight.
Wow. Okay.
So
What would his practice be?
Well, it's all relative. So this is the thing. So the East Africans are notorious for people. There's articles, there's books written about this where like North American guys go over and train with the Kenyans in, Iten. I think it's Iten is the town, kind of the famous running town with the clay tracks and all this. And they go out for like their easy run, which might be in the morning, it might be in their afternoon, and they might do 2 runs a day, but their Sunday run. And it's laughable. These guys that are capable of running 2:05 marathons are shuffling along for an hour and a half at like 9 minute pace. You know what I mean? So their easy runs are ridiculously easy. So again, I apologize if we talked about this first time. I used to write a monthly article in the
never
press.
talked about this, yeah.
Okay. I used to write this article, the running doc, we used to call it, and just running based injury stuff usually. By far the most commented on article I wrote was something called the 80-20 rule. Okay. Yeah. So there was a famous study done several years ago by an American named Stephen Seiler, I think it's Seiler, Seiler, I think is how he pronounces it, who now lives in Norway, I believe. And he basically looked at the 5 major endurance sports in the world, okay? That's distance running, it's distance road cycling, Tour de France, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's rowing,
okay.
It's cross-country skiing,
okay.
And it's, running, road cycling, rowing. Swimming.
Oh, yeah.
Distance swimming. So kind of the big 5 of longer aerobic sports that have been around a long, long time. And what he wanted to do is he looked at several hundred from multiple countries, Olympic team level performers. So he wasn't looking at you and I. He was looking at various people that were Olympic quality type runners and athletes in all the different sports. And he looked at training logs. I think he went back close to 10 years of training, 8 or 10 years. Looked at coaches' books, the Garmin, all their workout files, their heart rate data, everything. And he put it all into a computer. And he wanted to find out, what do the elite of the elite in the endurance sports, how are they training? And using the same 5-zone aerobic system, 1 being the easiest, zone 5 being basically topping out at max heart rate. What do you think the amount? Now, again, it changed depending on the time of year a little bit, if it was an Olympic year versus the year after the Olympics. But if you averaged out an average training year of all of these athletes of 5 different endurance sports, what percentage of their training time in an average year was spent in zone 1 and 2?
I mean, I would think it. Yeah, because you said distances. 75, 80?
A little over 80.
Yeah.
Like 82 or 83% of all of every minute of their training, 82% were in zone 1 or 2. So you think of these high-level athletes must be hitting it hard and doing these crazy track sessions and sprinting
it's
up hills.
The inverse of what a normal person would
Yes,
think. Yeah.
and they call it the 80-20 rule. Now, there's a lot of 80-20s. There's
Yeah.
Pareto's principle in
yeah.
business and all that. But this is the 80-20, is that 80% of your training should be in zone 1 or 2. Very, very little in zone 3, which this is what my article was about, is ironically where most people do almost all their workouts. We call it no man's land.
Okay.
It's moderately hard, zone 3. It's moderately hard. It feels like you're getting a good workout in. You feel like you're doing something, right? You're sweating. You're breathing quite a bit harder. It's hard enough to break down your body, but not really hard enough to really make any high-level changes physiologically. It's no man's land.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what you need to do is make sure roughly 80% of your training time in a given week or a given month is in that zone 1 and 2. And then maybe 15, 20% in zone 4 and maybe 5 or 10% in zone 5. So maybe, like I said, once a week, if you're working out 7 days a week, maybe one, you can throw some high-end hill sprints, some speed work. You know, some of that high-end stuff is important. But what most regular Joes who just want to finish the Century bike ride or improve their marathon or do a Spartan or CrossFit Games or whatever would be much better served spending the vast majority. And they'll like it more. It's so nice to finish a workout and feeling good.
It was actually kind of funny because a lot of this stuff, my background, if I had to pick anything, was obviously, kind of the CrossFit stuff before. And there's two variations of this. There was this track coach that had done ultras, and he had done, I think he was, I don't know if he won or he did something with one of the first ever Ironmans out in Kona. So he ended up kind of switching over to the CrossFit space, became a coach for a lot of the the running part.
Oh,
of
you're talking about
Hinshaw.
No, that's what I was thinking of. I was
So
talking about Brian McKenzie.
Well, he did it too. So he was
Yeah.
actually the original guy.
Right,
And then,
right.
and he, probably 15, 20 years ago now was Brian, and then it switched over to Chris. And so what Chris did is he took an athlete that was primarily like big, strong, like had a lot of what you needed in that sport, but had really shitty endurance.
Yes.
And what he did was, I remember the guy went into the games, and I think like three or four endurance type workouts over like 15 over the course of a weekend. I think his average placing was like second place.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at this guy, he's like 5'8", 215, like little ball of muscle, but I trained with him and had learned how to do it. And he also, this is when the nutrition was changing too, where it went from like the paleo diet to like, you got to eat some gels. So he was eating a lot more, carbs and keeping his intake up. And then the second one was the same Chris guy. Worked with, I don't know if you're familiar with the guy from Vermont that won a bunch.
Yes.
Matt. So Matt Fraser started working with him, and there was like the first year Matt came out and like blew away the field. Like it was they did a hill run. It was the first workout, and they were kind of like live streaming it, and someone lost him. They're like, yeah, Matt was winning, and like I guess Matt's falling back from the pack, and they were following the next guys. Come to find out, he actually was so far ahead that they actually weren't even paying attention. They ran by. And then he ended up doing a couple other sprint workouts and things, but Hinshaw had talked about it, and he kind of did what you just talked about with training more that low level.
Yeah.
And it increased. So, but I didn't understand the concept until you explained it.
Yeah.
And now the Matt guy who's put out like training programs and stuff, one of the things that he did during his course of like 5 years of winning every year was he trained, I think it was at minimum twice a week in zone 1 or 2 long.
Yeah.
And he did some other stuff too, because obviously he's elite. But and that was one of the things people were like, yeah, he's, because primarily, that sport, it's more of like high intensity, high, like probably that 4 and 5. And he was doing a lot of that low level. Yeah. And I think because he was an engineer and had a big background on all this stuff. But it was kind of a paradigm shift for a lot of people in there because like, wait, how is this guy doing? He kind of, obviously when he was actually doing this stuff, he was kind of keeping it hush because it was like stuff that he knew that they didn't.
Well, it's one of those CrossFit challenges, right? Is because that's one of, I guess, the negatives, and every plan has a negative or 2 or 3, whatever, I think one of the negatives to and I'm going traditional CrossFit was this habit of hitting it really hard every time you went into the gym.
Correct. Yeah.
And granted, you mixed it up in different, lifts and different things and stuff, but it's still, it was hard to get past the intensity the vast majority of the time. Now, there are some changes, talking to a few CrossFit owners and stuff over the years where they're starting to do more of that. But the old kind of wives' tale, I guess, if that's still a phrase, but was, you don't want to be messing around with any low-level aerobic as a strength and power athlete because it's going to take your top edge. You're going to lose your top end.
Correct,
You're going to lose your speed, your power. And that probably just isn't the case at all. And in a game, like something like a CrossFit Games, where, now they they're known to throw in some crazy stuff in there. But when you think about it, the vast majority are still these kind of power events. Yeah. But even if you do, if you're having to do 3 or 4 of those events over the course of 6 or 7 hours, you don't underestimate the ability to have a really solid aerobic base of which to layer all this other stuff on.
And I think that that's what happened with Matt, was he was able, and he even said it, he's like,
wasn't fatiguing as fast.
Wasn't fatiguing. And he said, I think 2 of the reasons was what you just mentioned, and the other one was nutrition, where most of these guys were like eating and like, I'm not hungry, blah, blah, blah. And he was like force feeding himself. And I think there was one story he was talking about. He would take like Snickers bars and like undo the wrapper and throw it in the garbage because people thought like, what are you eating, like a protein bar or whatever? And he was just eating I mean, it's not the best quality, but at that level, you had to get carbs and sugar in. So he was saying, basically got to the point where he was just like, he would get to the end of the games like, oh, what are you going to eat? And he's like, I don't want to eat a thing. Like, I'm stuffed. Because he had ate constantly, but he had kept his energy, so he never had a dip off. And I think it was a mixture of both. He had the energy from food, but he also had the capacity from what he had generated. And it was the first, actually, what you had just said about how that increased, I didn't really understand it until now.
Yeah, so that makes sense. And so that's what most people, getting back, if we want to go full circle, back to the VO2 and ultimately like, hey, I'd like to live longer and healthier.
Yeah.
Is getting this VO2 up, and the best way to do that is just low level, a lot of easy conversational pace aerobic work.
And like you said, it keeps the frequency they can work out increases just because you're not killing yourself.
That's
Injuries down, like you don't feel sore the next day.
That's right. And then motivation increases to do it again and to do it again.
Yeah. So, and when you were going 7 years, like that was a lot of your training, which allowed you to kind of like...
Yeah, and even then, before I really focused on it, and I was younger, I could get away with more stuff like we all can. I still probably was way too much over that 80-20, high intensity.
So what do you wear, just typically like a Garmin watch?
Yeah, this is old. This is a Phoenix, one of the FENIX.
But that tracks enough just based on your pulse on your wrist?
Yeah, since I started getting a little more hardcore into the heart rate stuff, I sometimes I'll forget it, but I bought a cheap strap. A heart rate strap's infinitely more accurate. Again,
and that syncs up with that?
Yes.
Or can Bluetooth or however it works?
Yep. ANT Plus, I think, is kind of the technology. There's a few different options now, but yeah, any cheap, you could get, one of these knockoffs on Amazon for $30 for a heart rate strap. And it shows on your watch if you want it to. So if I really care, but listen, again, I'm a low common, let's keep the bar as low as possible. If someone's got a cheap Fitbit that does a wrist heart rate,
Yeah.
If they're really hairy, I might have them like buzz the hair under the watch to make sure the band is snug. It's probably going to be, so what if it's off 3 or 4 beats?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
most people, it's like if you
in the
really
range.
want to make an effort and say, I'm going to lose some weight and I'm going to work on developing my aerobic fitness by walking or going to the mall or doing the treadmill in your basement, wrist is fine, man.
And when you're talking being in that zone, what time duration in that zone? Is there a specific time duration that you, like a sweet spot, or kind of like this is a good range? I know you said a few hours a week.
The
but-
evidence is the more the better.
So there's really no like. What would you think then if that's the case? What would be the low level baseline? Like 3 hours a week?
Yeah, and we don't know exactly. I don't
Okay.
think anybody, there's you can read numbers all over the board from the experts, but most people are really shooting for like an hour a day.
So about 7
minutes.
hours plus a week?
45 minutes to an hour. Now, if you have to break that into 2 different sessions, and again, I don't want to lose people though over that concept that say, well, one, I don't have the time. I just don't. 99% of the time, I don't. Now, I get it. You were in the 3 young, 3 kids?
3, yeah.
Right? Yeah, 3. Young kids and all this and that. But man, there's enough people that get up at 5 in the morning. Or if that would be how I would choose if I had to. I mean, I'm not one to motivate to do it at 8 at night, but it's just priorities.
Yeah.
It really is. Again, there's exceptions, but for 99% of people, I just saw some tweet the other day. What's kind of funny is, you sleep 8 hours and you work 8 hours because that leaves you 10 more hours. He goes, don't tell me you can't eat right or find a little time to get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
That's all. There is a lot of free time if you're
I had
prioritizing.
a friend, this is a local guy actually. He goes, excuses are bullshit. He goes, basically,
Yeah.
it's just it's an excuse, but it's prioritization. That's why I always go up and I'm like, if it comes to me not working out, if it comes to me not stretching, like I'll go in and talk to him. Like honestly, just didn't make a priority of it, and that's what it comes down to.
No, and yet, and I've been known to do this. I love movies, I love television and stuff. I just do. So put TV in front of the treadmill. I mean, you're sitting there on the couch for 3 or 4 hours every
When I
single
get your phone
night.
on half the time, just stream it on your phone.
Right. There's really not many excuses anymore.
Yeah.
Especially if you just say, hey, I only got to get my heart rate up. Geez, that could be walking the dog for most people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something.
It's wild to think that though. Like you said, the effort is relative to what you're, and because that's the part I don't think that I got. I'm like, yeah, but if you're only going that fast, then that can't be. But again,
that's
relative.
what makes them even crazier.
So
when you think about it.
So when like say those runners are going and they're running the 4.5 minutes, and then they're training at 9 minutes.
Not always. I mean, those would be like their easy recovery runs. Would be quite.
But even
slow.
if they were going fast, they probably aren't running the 4 something.
No, because that's a
like
race
game day.
pace. But they could easily, if they're doing a tempo workout once or twice a week, they're going to be at or around their race pace.
Yeah.
So they may be doing 1 mile repeats at 4 something pace or quicker, 4:30 pace.
But for
4:40.
them, their VO2 zone would be in that 4 or 5 range at that point.
That's right.
Gotcha.
That might be their part of their 20%.
Gotcha.
But then the rest might be, I mean, if they're doing a marathon in 2 hours and 2 minutes or 2 hours and 5 minutes, their long, easy run pace, which would be zone 2, probably is still like 5:30 to 6 pace.
So they could. So even though it looks quick, they may only be in zone 3
or 2
or 2 in
Right.
race. That's wild. That's
imagine
crazy.
that you could be running a 5:30 mile in zone 2.
And so, their VO2 max would be off the charts, like relative,
super high.
Yeah, 70s, 80s,
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
Um.
Well, and so what I like to do you do Strava at all? Are you on Strava? You ever
No.
heard of Strava?
No.
Oh, that's funny. You should. It's probably the biggest social media workout site.
This one right
It's-
here?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's free.
never
I
heard
mean,
of
I
it.
have a
That's
paid
cool.
account. You can pay a few bucks a year. It's a social media Facebook kind of for working out. And so you just follow people. You follow athletes, famous people are on there.
Really?
Yeah. And then what they do is you sync like their workout watch, their Garmin or whatever, and all their workouts are uploaded. So if you you could probably look me up. You might. Oh, you know what? I don't have my phone. I was going to say you could look me up. You need to sign up.
Yeah.
That's all right. But anyway, you can see people's workouts. It has the map. It has all their stats. It has exactly what they did. What I do with Strava is, oops, hold on. Let me show you something. Here we go. Here, you can look them. There you go. So these are people I follow. So if you kind of scroll down, you could see there's a bunch of French guys that run the Ultra Trail Mount Blanc, and there's backcountry skiers, and there's marathoners, and you just follow, and most people just accept you, and then you can see all their workouts. And so what I do when I use Strava, it's super popular, and then you can click on workouts and see the analysis. So you can see what their mile by mile pace of whatever they did.
Could you see their heart rate and what zone they're in?
It's up to them. Some people have it turned on, some people don't. More of the competitive athletes, but yeah, those that do, cool. It's the first thing I look at, Galen, is like, you ever heard of Kilian Jornet? So Kilian Jornet is this world-class mountain runner, ultra. He set the world record of time going up Everest, and he backcountry skis. He's just the freak of all freaks when it comes to mountain running, and skiing, backcountry skiing and everything. And he'll go do something, and it's like, he's a tiny guy. He's like 140 pounds, super skinny. And he'll post, I'll see all his workouts. And he just did one the other day where he was backcountry skiing and climbing. And he did like 22 something miles over like 4.5 hours. And I look, really crazy pace and like 13,000 feet of climbing or something. And I look, his average heart was like 139. So like effortless, for like a 38, 40-year-old guy. That's wild. And so I always go to heart rate first because it always blows me away because I'm like, wow, this guy did a 20-mile training run, like a long run at like 6:05 pace, for the marathon.
So that might be like mid twos for him.
What do you mean?
Like VO2.
Oh, zone 2.
Zoned.
Yes.
Which again, for most people, that could be just like a normal walk down the road.
Yes.
That's so wild.
Yep.
It's almost like it's like bending what you think should actually happen.
Yeah.
It's almost warped, like kind of thinking.
So for just personal story, so back, I did Ironman Placid in 2006, 2007, 2009. In hindsight, was doing most of my training probably in zone 3 and 4. Not knowing it, not really paying much attention to heart rate back then. Just going out and training kind of by feel. Mm-hmm. I look back and I kick myself because if I would have focused on that more in those years, I did perfectly fine. My last 2 years I went just under 11 hours, 10:59, 10:57, which pretty respectable because back then I had, I was in my, what was that, 07 and 09. So how many years ago is that now? 2019,
you would have
14
had young kids
years.
too.
Yeah, I had 2 kids, like 2 and 4 years old. I was running 2 offices. I was lucky if I got 8 to 10 hours a week in, which is nothing for most Ironman people. Or women. But I look back at that last year when I did 10:57, my average heart rate for 11 hours was 167, which is an enormously high number.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was saying earlier, is you can fake it and do a pretty decent job.
Yep.
But man, that would have been, even being 35 years old or 37 years old, that high 160s probably was at least low zone 4 for me. If not a little higher. Yeah. And I'm like, I held that for 11 hours. And I'm like, man, if I had an aerobic base, I could have been doing that same pace at like maybe 15, 20 beats a minute lower if I had spent.
So if you were doing, so how would that translate again? Just like the relationship. So if that number went from 160 down to 130, your heart rate.
At the same pace.
Yeah. It would have been, you obviously could have gone faster because you could have pushed the pace.
Well, right, you're thinking of it the wrong way. So if I had built my zone 2, let's just say, for biking and running, the top of my zone 2 may have, it's always, I was trying to think of the easiest way to explain this. So basically, if I went 11 flat and my average heart rate was 167, okay? If I had spent a year, 2 years prior to that training way more aerobic base, zone 1 and zone 2, I may still have been able to go at 167 for 10 hours, but I may have knocked an hour off my time. So you see what I'm saying? At the same effort, your speed is going to be improved with a bigger aerobic base because 167 will not seem as high, or I could go at the same pace with a much lower heart rate.
And it just feel easier.
And it would feel easier. Exactly.
And I would say naturally you're probably you want it to go the same pace and feel easier. You go faster.
That's right.
And feel the same pace.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, that's wild. And it's crazy because it doesn't, like what you said, relative to a race like that, like taking an hour, I mean, that's dropping, 10% of your time just by training that. And arguably, you probably could have went even quicker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
who knows? Yeah,
That's
it's a lot of
crazy.
things. Because now you're talking, you start going multi-hour, then, nutrition is a huge role.
Yeah.
And you talk to anybody who does any Ironmans or ultra marathons is the other
more
popular
dialed
one.
on all the...
It's just, there's a lot more crap that can go wrong.
So I want to go back to the one that you were talking about before, just very quickly. The Blue Zone, you talked about Greece. So Blue Zone, for people that don't know, these are places that historically the age or the life expectancy is higher than normal.
Significantly higher of 90 to 100 plus year old people, yes.
And I guess, where are the Blue Zones roughly that you know of? And then what's your experience with the Blue Zones? Like, what's life like in the Blue Zone?
Well, and it varies tremendously. So number one, this is not my field of expertise. I've just had a really strong interest in it for probably 20 years. It was started by a guy, the guy whose name is connected to it is Dan Buettner. Buettner.
Right here. Yeah.
Buettner. Funny enough, the book's been out. His book called The Blue Zone. I think he was originally sponsored by National Geographic, possibly. Don't quote me on that. But basically, he and his researchers just kind of discovered these little outliers, these communities, these regions of the world that had way higher levels of old people, okay? And healthier, not just living longer, living better longer, okay? And they called these the Blue Zones. I think it was basically because they circled them in blue on the map, literally.
Very basic.
Yeah. And so he's got a fairly new Netflix series out that just came out in the last year. Very polished and very high editorial. It's really sharp production value. It's really cool. And basically each episode is a different zone. And so basically they discovered 5 blue zones in the world. One is interestingly, in Loma Linda, California, in Southern California. Yeah. Another one is this Nicoyan, I believe it's called, Nicoyan Peninsula in Costa Rica. The other one is Sardinia, off the coast of Italy.
Okay.
The other one is Ikaria, Greece. And the other one is Okinawa, Japan. Those are the 5.
Actually, here we go. Here's a map, too.
Yep. And so all of them extraordinarily different. They're different geographically. They're different religions. They have hugely different diets. In general, different diets with some common themes. And basically, they went and did a deep dive at each one of these places. Now, interestingly, Loma Linda's there because Loma Linda is almost exclusively, the entire city is Seventh-day Adventists. So these are super strict. It's a sect, a branch of... I think Mormonism, but I'm not sure. But very, very religious folks who are extremely strict. Is it? No, actually, no. Seventh-day Adventist. It's not.
No, you're right.
Is it Mormon?
Loma Linda, yeah.
Loma Linda. I don't think they're Mormon. But anyway, they're a very strict religious sect where there is no alcohol. I don't believe they do caffeine. Tons of focus on extended family, living together. Education is very, very high. So that's kind of the overriding theme there. I think very little red meat. I think a lot of vegetarianism, but don't quote me on that. The Nicoyan Peninsula, lots of beans, lots of, starchy vegetables. Okinawa, on the other hand, tons of rice, tons of seafood, so very different. I got infatuated for some reason years ago with this island called Ikaria in Greece. And I have been there 3 times now, 3 summers in a row. We've spent some time there on vacation. And I'm absolutely in love with it. I'd move there tomorrow. It's one of the most laid back. The Greeks in general are pretty laid back people. Okay. And they all make fun of Ikaria, like leave your watch at home. Half the time the stores just, if they don't feel like opening, they're just not going to open. But like 1 in 3 people on this small island live to 90 or more. And in these blue zones, not only are they living to 90, 100 plus, they have virtually no heart disease. They have no dementia or Alzheimer's. They have very very low rates of cancer. So they're not only just living longer, their health span is much longer. And I could see it. I mean, personally, you see that they walk everywhere. It's a very rugged island. Okay. Beaches on the coast,
hillside,
big mountains, steep cliffs and mountains. They have a very rough history. Like the country of Greece didn't even really recognize them until the 1970s and 60s. So they were basically used to doing everything themselves. They used to be hammered with, hundreds of years ago. They had different pirates would attack the island, and they learned how to do these very unique things.
What's this right here?
That's Turkey.
That's Turkey. Okay.
Yeah, so it's almost to the coast of Turkey.
I don't think I realized that Greece had that many islands that go all the way over.
Thousands, I think.
That's
in
wild.
total. Yeah.
Because you always look at this and then maybe that.
No, you can see Turkey from the island on a clear day.
Wow.
It's I don't know exactly how many miles, but not that far.
Yeah.
And so so they walk everywhere. They have their own wine going back centuries that are only grown with grapes from that island. They have their own honey that has these high antibacterial things just from bees on that island. And I don't know. I've just been very infatuated with it. And
what do you think the main, is it mostly diet? I mean, do people, they don't move there and strictly say, like, I'm not drinking alcohol, I'm not having coffee.
Quite the opposite there.
Okay.
They, like I said, they're Icarian wine. Most drink a moderate amount of wine. Their daily steps, quote unquote, I hate that kind of phrase, but they move a lot. Okay. They tend to their gardens. They walk between villages to get groceries. They're just very active people, but there's also a very high friends and family connectivity rate. They have these festivals like, every month or two where they're up all night, but dancing. And it's very family oriented. And the diet is very low in red meat. They have wild goats is about the only, if you want to call that red meat, but also very little seafood, believe it or not, for an island. So lots of beans, dark red,
is
vegetables.
There a correlation to, I was going to say longevity and non-meat or...
No, that's all over the board too.
Yeah.
I think red meat, maybe a little bit of a connection. That's kind of outside my expertise.
Yeah.
But you also don't see, the push years ago was with, the vegetarianism or the veganism. There really isn't any connection there either. What does seem, and Dan Bittner...
Most of them are roughly around the same...
Well, yeah, you're looking at latitude.
Latitude.
Yeah, warmer weather, for sure.
I was going to say, they seem like they're kind of pressed down a little bit more.
Definitely warmer weather, which you could, I guess...
just going outside. Yeah.
Well, there's interesting geographical things. So is there something with warmer weather? Is there something you could argue to less variations in daylight the closer you get to the equator? The days are closer to 12 hours of light year round.
Gotcha.
And they don't have these extended seasons with almost no dark and almost no light,
Yeah.
I'm just speaking out loud. I have no evidence of this. I'm just thinking, there's a huge connection we've known for 30 plus years with hugely higher rates of MS, multiple sclerosis around the 42nd, 43rd, 44th degree latitude, all the way around the globe. People in this area, and that's us,
I was going to say, we fall in that
have much higher rates of MS.
And
no one that I know of has an answer to it.
But I would say there's people around here that know people that have MS. You know what I mean? So
it's not. Yeah, but I'm just saying there's certain things in the world. Who knows if we'll ever find answers? But there's definitely geographical or connections there. We're going all over the board with this today.
How much time do you have, John?
I got as much time as you want, dude.
Okay, we'll go a few. Yeah, we'll go a little bit longer. I guess we're going to go a little longer on this one.
Go for it, man.
Because I was going to end it with like some easy ones but no, I want to keep going on some of this.
Deep dive.
So this is what last week we went, and I think I told you we went up to Mont Tremblant, which was fun. It was cold as hell, but I wish it was a little warmer. But we ended up doing this spa thing before. It was a Scandinavian spa. I think I was telling you about it. So obviously it's hot cold contrasts, kind of like relaxation. It was we were there probably like 3 hours, and I would say. Partly there was the hot, there was the cold, there was the aspect of it was quiet, there was no digital distractions. I also spent time just with my wife, so it was like very just relaxing. And for 3 hours, it was amazing. And it's crazy how in 3 hours you can go from, baseline life to like you leave and just like I'm just mellowed out and feel great. And what's to be said? Because I know you talked about like cold showers and then sauna. I've been trying to incorporate more sauna. Haven't done the ice bath thing yet. I would like to try it, or cold showers or whatever. But so basically what we did, and we went from their prescription there was, and again, they're talking to the common person of, general guideline was about 15 minutes in some type of hot. And hot being hot tub, dry sauna, or steam sauna. So those are kind of the options. So you go in about 15 minutes. Then they said to go into the cold, they said go in for like 15 to 20 seconds. Now I've heard, and when I say cold, most of the ones there were somewhere between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
They did have the river open, which is closer to freezing, but I don't think anybody went down there. So when you're looking at the two, and then after you went into the cold, there was kind of like they suggested maybe like a 15 minutes, just what they call relaxation, where you just kind of go sit, not cold, not hot, put a towel or robe on and just kind of chill out. After doing both of those, so we went into the the dry sauna for about 15, maybe 20 minutes tops. Then we went into the cold, and there was a guy there who was like, if you want to do like the guided tour kind of thing of it, you can. So we end up doing like some breathing exercises in the sauna, left the sauna to go in the cold, and he's kind of giving you tips. Basically it's breathe through it. You can stand it. Just regulate your breathing. Don't like get tight up like this and stay loose. And a couple things he said was like keep your shoulders down, almost smile, just like to kind of mentally not get into the shock. So I ended up going in the cold, which was like 50-something degrees for about 3 minutes.
Yep.
And it was more tough in the beginning, and then it kind of slow. It's not easy at all, but like it certainly gets easier as you go along. But then you got out and you just chilled, and it felt amazing when you got out. Yeah. So have you done stuff like that? Are you familiar? I mean, what's your level?
I have never done a spa.
Okay.
You look at me, what I do for a living. I've only had I think I've had 2 massages in my entire life.
Okay.
And to show you how not attentive I am at my own body sometimes is, I remember years ago, probably before you guys were even married, your lovely wife, we did a barter on treatments, and she owed me a few free ones. And I never took her up on it. I didn't even have to pay for them. So that tells you how bad I am.
I think they're still there because every time I go in, I'm like, so I saw John, and John mentioned this, said he wanted to talk to you about this or this. And then she's like, he's supposed to come in.
And that's literally probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
14 years ago.
I think we've had 10 years of her being like, he still has to come in.
Yeah. So, no. So that shows you how bad I am. So I've never really done a spa like that, although there are supposedly some good ones up in Montreal I'd be curious about.
Yeah.
My experience has come mainly to just the cold showers at home. And it's one of those weird things in life that until I started my streak years ago, my first streak with the cold, something you never crossed my brain is how much, especially up here in this neck of the woods, how much colder the cold water is in like January and February than it is in the summer.
Yeah.
Again, it makes sense, but it's just something that never crossed my mind because I've never stood under ice cold water before.
Yeah.
And then thrown in with an occasional, very rare jump in the lake in the winter. I've done a few times over that where I've wandered in on the boat launch or something if it's open.
Yeah.
Where it's probably in the upper 30 degrees.
That's cold.
But most of the studies I've seen, it is around 50 to 53 degrees, a lot of the studies. So right where they had you, temperature-wise. Again, it depends. The answer is it depends on the goals. And I'm not an expert on cold and heat. I've certainly read a lot, but certainly not I don't have a PhD in any of this stuff. It depends on what your goal is. Because what I think one of the problems is, and this is a whole other can of worms, but there's a lot of evidence that says athletes probably should not be doing cold fairly soon after a workout if they're looking to maximize gains. Okay, whether that's muscular gains, physiological, aerobic, whatever, is that the body needs that time to basically recover, and kind of quickly plummeting the body temperature may be slowing or minimizing some of the gains from that workout. So if you are going to do cold, it might be better to do it later in the day than right after your workout.
Could you go hot then cold? Like when you get out?
It doesn't matter. It's because the other things I've read is just is if you're going to go back and forth or you're going to do a regular shower, you should. Most of the stuff I've read is recommending always finishing on cold.
Yes.
And so if you're finishing on cold, again, I do it in the morning shower. It's just easiest.
Yep.
But I'm also not a world-class athlete, so it probably doesn't matter a whole lot to regular Joes and Janes that are just trying to work out and be fit. But I guess there is some stuff out there that says to maximize the benefits of your workout, not doing the cold. It's similar reasons in a way we don't recommend anybody icing anymore for musculoskeletal injuries. Like we all grew up doing, is there is something to that natural inflammation that occurs after an injury, and even to some lesser extent after a good workout, that stimulates the healing and the recovery process. And when you blunt that with ice or slow it down and minimize the inflammatory response, it might numb the area up, but it may be delaying the healing process or the recovery process.
So if you had like a rolled ankle, just let it swell up?
Yeah, we've completely gone back the last 10 or 12 years.
Okay.
All of that growing up with the RICE, remember rest, ice, compression, elevation, and then it became PRICE, protect, RICE, elevation, compression. It is now no longer for musculoskeletal injuries. We never recommend ice anymore. Now, the only exceptions would be, do not consider this medical advice if I don't see you in person. If you had severe swelling for some reason or severe bruising, maybe ice for like a day to 2 or 3 days at most.
Yep.
But even then, I'd probably recommend just not doing anything and then switching to heat within a couple of days.
And so obviously cold compresses, heat is what relaxes, or what's the...
Don't even think of it that way. The whole purpose, and it's also why now we are recommending, again, for musculoskeletal injuries. So you pull a muscle, you tweak your back, your tendinitis flares up, arthritis, most arthritis for this matter, things like that. Really try to avoid taking any NSAIDs, your Advils, anything that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, for the same reason that the inflammation. So you injure a muscle or a disc or whatever it is, you injure a body part. One of the reasons it hurts is that inflammation is produced, which protects you, right? It creates pain, it keeps you from moving too much, and it keeps you from doing more damage.
Okay.
The trouble is, in that inflammation, that fluid that the body naturally is producing are these enzymes that trigger the body to initiate the healing process. So when you block the inflammation with an Advil, or you minimize the inflammation by packing bags of ice on it, you are temporarily making it numb up and feel a little better, but you're delaying the onset of healing. Okay. And so it'll take that injury longer to heal. So unless the pain is really, really severe, we really try to recommend do not use NSAIDs and try to minimize using any ice.
And when you go to heat, what's the purpose of the heat?
So the heat is warming tissue, obviously. Mm-hmm. So for things like tendon issues, tendons love heat. It increases elasticity. It increases blood flow. So any kind of stagnant blood, bruising, whatever is going to help speed that up. But heat just feels good. If you just talk to people, I see people all day long, and they're like, "Oh, I've been icing." I'm like, "No, we really, you strained your back." And I said, "Have you been icing?" Yeah, that's what I was told to do. Okay, we really switched to heat immediately. Oh, almost all the time it's, "Oh, thank you. Heat feels so much better." And I'm like, I wish people would just trust their instinct. We've kind of known you feel better after you use heat. People just do ice because it's all we've been told for our whole lives.
And sometimes, like you said, kind of the working out in zone 1 or zone 2 or having heat, like that's actually the opposite of what people think. They got to struggle to have whatever, and it's actually sometimes easier. Is that pretty common, that it's usually, like you said, the more natural, feel-good one is the one we should do, or is there a point of push?
Well, no, but there seems to be more and more, again, not just to get back to the brain driving everything, even though we may not understand why or how. There are studies that were done several years ago with running sneakers, with mattresses. And what they did was essentially told people to go in, like the running shoe. So they took a whole bunch of recreational runners. They split them into 2 groups. One group they sent in to be completely evaluated by a team of experts, podiatrists, running experts, biomechanists, their high-speed gait analysis on the treadmills, all this. And then they were customized, given recommendations of specific makes and models of running shoes that they need to wear based on all their unique findings.
Okay.
The other half were taken to like a Dick's Sporting Goods and said, we just want you to
Run
try
around the
at
track.
least 4 or 5 different makes and models, get on the treadmill, wear them around the store for a few minutes. Just wear the ones home that feel best on your feet in the store. And then they've tracked them for weeks and months. And the group that chose by comfort had far fewer lower extremity injuries than the people that were fitted. So our brains are telling us something. And they did a similar study with mattresses. Just pick the mattress based on comfort, try them on in the store for 5 or 10 minutes, and take the one home. And they rated higher satisfaction.
Do you know what the
ratings.
reason is?
No, I don't know, other than our brain is probably smarter than we tend to give it credit for.
Yeah.
And this kind of trusting instincts and trusting what feels good, there might be something to that across the board, I guess.
The
I mean, how about even relationships, People, you have these instincts. And the more people you meet, the more background you have, the bigger the baseline to draw from. But my wife always says, gets annoyed and you go to a party or a reception or something and I meet someone and that person's a little sketchy. And she, what are you talking about? They were nice. And, you find out a few months later, like, no, that person really was pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I find my read of people maybe a little better than average, but partly just because I have been doing nothing but talking to people one-on-one for 20-something years. And so, you learn to read people pretty quick.
Well, a couple things. I mean, just in life, this could be work, this could be friends, this could be whatever. Like, I've had a handful of times in my life where I get this, it's like a gut feeling. Everybody has like the day-to-day gut feelings, or I say day-to-day, maybe week to week. And there's been a couple times that I've had like almost like a physical pain from a gut feeling. And it's not like a negative physical pain. It's just I can physically feel something that I'm like, man, I feel like something's hitting me in the stomach, like the gut. And I'm assuming that's where the terminology comes from. And more times than not, it's kind of like whatever that gut feeling is ends up becoming a physical feeling. It's obviously tied in mentally, but sometimes it's not even a known thing. I feel like the gut hits you first, and then you're like, what is that? And then eventually your brain, and this is how I kind of feel. It's like I get a gut feeling, then I feel it physically, and then emotionally it kind of catches, my brain catches up to what it is, and then I react accordingly. But there is there's got to be some type of correlation between all that. We're back to the brain though, Galen. Yeah.
So there is a whole field of science that's now focused on the neurology between brain and your gut health. That there is a connection neurologically that might be an explanation for some of the stuff we talked about earlier, for some of these GI issues and autoimmune and celiac, does chronic stress lead we know it does now to physical issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Increased stress increases what's called the sympathetic nervous system, right? Your fight or flight.
Yeah.
And most of us are, unfortunately, in today's day and age, living our entire lives at this low to moderate stress level with no end in sight.
Yeah.
So we are living with chronic increased sympathetic nervous system tone. Now, when you think of the sympathetic nervous system, you think fight or flight, but it also, we now have evidence that increased sympathetic nervous system increases the fascial tone in your entire body. So you all heard of this fascia, it connects every muscle together. And you are living, people aren't just, I feel so tight all the time. There's a reason for that. And when you increase sympathetic activity on a chronic level, you deal with physical tightness because of it. When you can do deep breathing and you can increase what's called parasympathetic and decrease that fight or flight, the tone in your entire skeletal system decreases. It's really
so that's when you almost like you wash away the heaviness of whatever.
Exactly right.
I was gonna say, like, day to day, you talk about obviously you take care of yourself, you get outside, do that stuff. Do you find that you are able to manage stress level at all with that, or is that still part of? Because you kind of joking before, I think, about if something's moved or whatever, it stresses me out. My routine's not there, but like I would say is like I deal with stress. I think a lot of people deal with some level of stress, and I certainly feel like the days you don't have stress, where you're like, man, everything just felt like it went well today. You just feel more relaxed in other areas of your life, and there's a complete direct correlation, but it's also the logical thing is like do stuff that doesn't stress you out. I mean, we're human, so things come in our lives, and we're trying to fight it. I mean, is that something that you find that you deal with? Do you find that like you've able to prioritize parts of your life which kind of suppress any type of stress that you get?
Yeah, I've found, to kind of answer your question, I think I've learned to compartmentalize it. Meaning, by far, the biggest stress day to day of my life are my work days.
Yeah.
It's really fast paced. I don't take a lunch break. I don't take any breaks. I just work for 8+ hours. Coming in the late
with people nonstop.
Nonstop.
Yep.
2 or 3 rooms going, nonstop. All the issues that come about with dealing with 20 or 25 people in a day, different personalities, and people running late, and just running a business, day to day. So I just kind of have taken I'm typically, because I travel a lot for work on the weekends, so I'm usually only in the office 3 long days.
Yep.
So I just compartmentalize, sometimes a 4th, depending if I'm working the weekends. But I just know in advance, those are my work days. So I still get a workout in, but I don't really mentally plan to accomplish much on those days of the week. It's just, let's get through the work day. And so I kind of know that. So I'm kind of a feast or famine.
Okay.
So when my days are off, I have 0 problems. I could sit, on vacation, people think, I got no problem. I could sit there on the beach with a Kindle for 8 straight hours and have 0 problems at all. I don't have the ants in the pants and this and that.
Yep.
It's just all or nothing. When I'm working, it's work. And when I'm not, I would rather take a hot shower or bath and read a book and just do what I like, watch TV. So I just find that easier to tolerate. I know my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays most week are going to be long and brutal, or whatever days I'm at the office. And then, when I travel for work, I do a lot of lecturing and teaching. I just was downstate this weekend teaching a 2-day class to a bunch of PTs and stuff. And those are also stressful for different ways, but not as high as my clinic days. So I've kind of clinic is A.
Yep.
If I'm working the weekends teaching, most people would think getting in front of a bunch of people talking all day is very, very stressful, but I've been doing it a long time. So, and I know the material. So that's a little, I'd say moderately stressful. And then my days off, obviously, are the least stressful. And so I just compartmentalize them.
Yeah. No, that's good. I try to, those are days when to me with kids, that's where I go is work days. I try to lock in to what I'm doing. And then I try, and I do this well if I do this, it goes well, I should say, is that typically when I have kids, I try not to put extra burden on myself of this has to get done, kind of what you just said. But then there's days where I still struggle with it, where I do get that, like you said, that jittery or antsiness of I got to do something because I feel like I'm not accomplishing anything. And there's times where I'm I just got to chill. And usually that happens on the weekends for me because some of the best weekends are we have nothing going on. But there's also times where the weekend where I'm I can only sit around so much. And usually you're trying to do house projects and you got, the kids and everything else. But I do find days that I can just sit and chill. And Sunday was a perfect example. I was I don't really feel like doing much today.
Yep.
And I just wanted to watch football and we just hung out. And it was just a nice... I felt good that the day was good. And I don't watch a lot of stuff during the day or on the weekends.
Yeah, I don't.
So just sit down and watch. And when I say watch the games, you're watching it, you're talking, you're kind of, but you're just chilling. You're not doing any. I'm not trying to do stuff around the house. I'm not doing work. I'm just kind of checked out. And there's a level there's a guy I know that told me, he goes, if you work really, really hard during the week, he goes, you can't work hard all the time. Kind of like you said with recovery days. So he goes, if you're going to rest, basically go all in on rest and just hang out and do nothing. And I kind of, that's something I always remember. And sometimes I try to do that when I'm Galen, just relax. You don't need to do this today.
But that gets us back to that 80-20 kind of rule. Even though obviously with life and work, we all wish it could be 80-20.
Yeah.
But if you could at least just polarize everything. Your stressful days are going to be your stressful days, but then you're not making a point of making your non-stressful days as little stress as possible. I think there's a benefit. There was a book, I won't say famous, that might be stretching it. I've seen the guy speak years ago. His name is Robert Sapolsky. He's got a new book out, actually. I saw on Instagram. But his book years ago is called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Okay.
And he's a PhD, and basically the whole book is on the harms of chronic stress. So hinting a little at what we were just talking about. But the reason the animal world doesn't have ulcers, quote unquote, using the stress analogy, is that in the world of a gazelle or a zebra, right, their world is from zero stress to literally life or death in a matter of seconds. The difference between the animal world and us is they know it is over in seconds, right? And then they're back to zero stress again, just grazing and eating and sleeping. And then the minute that thing starts chasing them, I'm either dead here in 6 seconds or I'm going to be completely peaceful again for the time being. We are the opposite. We are all living with low to moderate stress almost constantly. And the key takeaway from his study is with no end in sight. That's the problem.
Which leads to probably more stress.
It's just that's the key, is there's no foreseeable end to that stress. And so that's where you get stuck with starting to see these chronic symptoms.
Yeah.
And we haven't even mentioned really pain. You want to open an interesting field right now in the last 10 years is the field of pain science. Like, what is pain? Okay. And so, you mentioned your gut pain earlier and this and that, but let me ask you a question. And I ask this to like chiros and PTs when I teach my courses. What is pain? We all have experienced it, some of us a lot more often than others. Yeah. All different types of pain, whether it's a stomach ache or your Achilles tendon or your headache or your neck or your low back.
It's got to be something where, it's neurological. So like there's something where, because when you have pain, I go with this. If you get anesthesia, if you get an anesthetics, you go into surgery and they quote unquote knock you out, you typically wake up. You might wake up and come out and have pain from whatever you're coming out. You don't realize like something was cut open. You don't know what the incision. You don't know if they're poking and hitting nerves and stuff that would have been excruciating. Because for whatever reason, I don't know the science behind anesthetics, but it basically, I'm assuming, shuts off whatever those receptors are that would increase the pain or whatever. That's a very layman term, trying to guess at it. But I would say pain is some type of neurological response to probably physically hitting a nerve.
I wouldn't have expected you to answer this because it's very different than what most people. That seems to be the theme of the show. Different answers than people expect. And let me tell you what it is, and then I'll explain what I mean. Pain, and then I'm going to relate it back to chronic pain. Okay, because that's what I deal with a good chunk of my day is people with chronic pain, right? Low back for years and severe, and they're disabled and this and that, can't work, can't pick up the grand, all that. Pain is an emotion produced by the brain. So pain, the experience of having pain, is an emotion that the brain produces. So in a weird way, pain is no different than being happy or sad or fill in the blank of any emotion. So what we do not have in our body are pain signals. All we have millions and millions of nerve endings of all different types that are in every square millimeter of tissue, right? There are nerve endings called proprioceptors that tell you where you are in space. There's mechanoreceptors that tell you that you're moving, a body part is moving. There's millions of different types, okay? You also have something called nociceptors, okay? Nociceptors are, quote unquote, signal and sense damage, okay? So you put your hand on a hot burner, the nociceptive fibers in that area light up, and they start to bombard the brain with data. But there's not a pain signal. Every nerve in the body is only sending data to the brain. Think X's and O's, or like ones and zeros if you're a computer programmer, right? So that's you burn your hand, nociceptive data starts getting bombarded into the brain properly, and that's part of the reflex that makes you pull your hand back quick. It's what makes you ultimately hurt, because the way the system works is when the brain starts getting a bunch of extra nociceptive input data, it should interpret that and produce the emotion of pain. That's what protects you, whether it's a torn hamstring or a burned hand or you step on a needle.
Yep.
Right? You get nociceptive input to the brain. The brain produces the emotion of pain. Well, what we're finding is people that have chronic pain, and it doesn't make sense physically. I'll see people in my office that had a legit injury 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And why does their back still hurt as much now as it did 4 years before? Everything in the body, every expert in the world is in agreement. Every tissue in the body will heal itself if it's able to. It will heal itself within a few months to a year. So why is their pain levels still so high years later? Because everything should have healed many, many times over. Mm-hmm. So where I'm going with this is what we now know with a certain percentage of the population, and that can be with low back pain, it could be with any sort of pain anywhere in the body, that at some point in the recovery process, the wires get a little mixed up in their brain and body. And this is the key, is their brain starts producing the emotion of pain to non-nociceptive input. So now they just move their body part a few degrees, mechanoreceptors, proprioceptors trigger, the brain picks that up and produces the emotion of pain. That's why they can't move an inch or two without screaming out in pain. It's excruciating. That doesn't make sense. There's a reason why a lot of them have been through round after round of PT, multiple surgeries, injections, pain medications. Most of them are clinically depressed, right? Addicted to pills sometimes. Yeah. And none of it works.
Just to suppress that emotion of pain.
Their brain has become so threatened and scared and nervous that it's at, basically think of it as their brain has been sitting at terrorist level threat red.
Yeah.
So any kind of input, its brain is firing off this emotion of pain. Now, that's a weird concept, and people get very defensive because you think you're making it up.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that. I'm saying your pain is real. What's wrong in a lot of cases is that there's
might already
physically,
be healed.
that there's nothing physically wrong with the tissue.
Yeah.
The screw up is in the wiring and how your brain is interpreting it.
Wow.
It's crazy.
And there's been no, I guess, they've never come up with a solution to that.
Oh no, they have. So the world's best pain clinics are, I would say, are more psychotherapy than physical therapy at this point.
Okay.
Because this is a hard conversation for people like this, right? And what the goal is, and I have this talk weekly in my office with this population, is you have to understand that your pain you're experiencing when you stand up out of the chair and your back is screaming at you.
Yeah.
That again, with chronic people, that your pain you experience is real. It hurts, but that there's nothing physically wrong. And the way to reset that bar is to find some kind of movement. I don't care how silly or stupid or minimal it is. Maybe they can't move really much range of motion in any direction except one. Maybe they can kind of lean to their left a little bit, just a few inches, but they can do it. And like, oh, that's actually not too bad. That doesn't hurt too much. Well, guess what their homework is, their first visit? I'm going to have them doing like 20 of those left side bends every hour on the hour. Every week, every minute they're awake, I'm going to have them do a couple of those. Because what you're doing is you're showing their brain movement without pain. And what you can do with enough time and repetitions is that brain starts to become desensitized. That threat level starts to go from red down to orange, down to yellow, down to whatever, right? Yeah. And then if they're good about just doing those left side bends or whatever it might be, I check them back a week or two later. Very often, all of their range of motion has improved without ever once directly working it, meaning the brain feels safer.
Yeah.
And now allows a little better range of motion. And so over enough time, that's how you get a lot of these chronic pain people out of the funk. It's
just
hard.
Tricking the brain.
It is. It is in a way. The analogy I use in class a lot is if you and I are in the studio. If I had a 2x4, okay, and I had it 20 feet long, laying on the ground would you be willing to line up behind me? We're going to see if we can walk down this 4-inch wide board on the ground, right? Most people in the class would say I'd do that. Okay, what if we do it. Now I'm going to suspend it off a few ropes, 15 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
How many people in the class are jumping behind me to walk on that swaying, 4-inch board?
Yeah.
What's changed? It's the same board.
Yeah.
What's changed? The unknown.
Yeah.
The
or
threat.
the environment of
The threat.
Yeah.
The brain feels uncertain and it feels threatened.
Yeah.
That's how these chronic pain people are living every minute of every day. Their brain is constantly threatened and unsure of things. And that's why it becomes hypersensitive to everything. Very difficult.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But
Is that something like more recent that you've kind of come across and tried to?
It's not me by any means,
Or
but
something
this
you
is
picked up that
it's
you've been trying to-
the field of pain science has been probably really exploded the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
I actually highly recommend to anybody who is in chronic pain and is open-minded to this concept, and a lot aren't. It's a tough thing to wrap their mind around a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a great book called Explain Pain that's written by it's called Explain Pain. The authors are Moseley, Moseley, and Butler, Butler. Explain Pain. It is written for the layman. It's not some technical clinical book. It's a beautiful book with really cool illustrations, and it basically goes into a discussion of exactly what I've just been talking about. So anyway, that a little off the thing, but I think worth saying because so many people either are living with pain, and I'm not talking about you rolled your ankle in a soccer game. I'm talking about more of this
can't
chronic,
get out of bed, it hurts.
either severe all the time or people that just consistently are flaring the same thing up, every other week or every month and this. And it's just general considerate. Anybody that would fall under that kind of hypersensitive fill in the blank area.
The last thing I want to ask you before just for time, but kind of brain. This is totally off topic. Have you ever done logic puzzles?
No.
Do you know what they are?
I think, but give me an example.
So I like puzzles. I like thinking. I like just stuff that it's just even just the past time. I like just like stressing my brain. That could be reading. That could be thinking through stuff. So logic puzzles a lot of times are like perfect example. There's like a grid logic puzzle that I try to go on, and you pick. I've just been doing this. I picked it up recently, but it'll give you clues. You pop the clues in, and it's kind of like, okay, if this happens, that can't happen. So it's logical thinking, but you're trying to figure out basically a word problem or a puzzle purely based on logic. So I wasn't sure. You strike me as someone that might have done some of these, but it's very one. It keeps your brain active, so I like doing stuff that makes my brain think and work a little bit. It's a muscle, so I like to work it out. But the idea of logic is kind of I kind of try to think through things logically the best I can, and it just challenges your mind. It's just like a word problem.
Yeah.
It's just something. I didn't know if you did it, but when we talk about like the brain and stuff, it's like learning that kind of stuff that would put, I guess put a stressor on the brain, but hopefully like longevity wise might have a benefit down the road. I don't know if it does or not, but
no, definitely thinking. There was just something recently in the last week about languages. Learning a new language could that possibly put off dementia. As you get older, learning. I think it might have been in the New York Times or something recently. As a rule, funny enough, I absolutely hate logic puzzles.
Have you done them, or are you just based on what I'm talking about?
No, just anything.
So like something like this.
Yeah,
this is a very simple one. But
Yes, no, I hate that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's funny, and it goes all the way back. And
it seems like opposite of what I would expect.
Yes, no, I completely agree. But even as a kid, I don't like that sort of thing. I find it frustrating. Maybe I'm not that smart, or my brain doesn't work that way. I think as I've gotten older, do you know what the deepest I like to get with a puzzle? I love doing Wordle.
Okay.
And even like 3 out of 10 times, I just bail halfway through once I get frustrated. I get frustrated quite easily.
Okay.
I have learned myself approaching 50 that, again, I talk about, possibly being a little bit on the spectrum in certain phases of my life, not to minimize that by any means, but I have a brain that never shuts off. It's a real problem. Like the inner voice, the constantly thinking, not even about important things.
Yeah.
Just this nonstop bombardment. It's why I have so many lists, why I, different apps, and not even fancy apps, literally the notes and the whatever green app on Apple iPhone. It's constant. I've just learned I have to put it on paper.
Yeah.
The minute I think of something, I got to do this, I got to do that. And I'm a very visible list person like that. I find I don't need any help getting
stuff.
my brain stirred up.
And
so I think that's might be why I find those frustrating. It's also, I think, why I find hanging out in the water so much. Now, I've tried to learn surfing a few times.
Okay.
I just don't have the opportunity very often.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to hurt a skill when
No.
you try it for 3 hours, like every third year when you go in the right place of vacation. But what I've done since I was a little kid is I love body surfing.
Okay.
Like I'll just go get a bodyboard, find the biggest waves I can, and just like I could play for hours and hours in the waves. And what hit me a couple of years ago was I get out of the water after 2 hours and realize I haven't had a single thought in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Literally just
lose yourself.
I'm just waiting. I'm staring at the water, reading the water. Is this going to be the wave to catch? Timing it, all of that. And so I think that's why I tend to find that meditative, maybe even skiing, the downhill
I was about
part.
to say, skiing to me,
Yep.
I get that response.
But the problem with the uphill is then you just a lot of time just in your own head marching up a hill with your skis on. But definitely the downhill stuff.
Yeah.
So I tend to gravitate toward more, I don't know even what, I'm not a psychiatrist. What would you call it? More distractive things, I guess, because that would be the opposite. That's like super focused thinking.
Yeah.
Those type of logic things.
Well, I was telling you, so I got I'm using them pretty much every day now. The Bose noise canceling. I use it for work. But I'll put them on and then I'll play through my phone, just like ambient background music.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing is just sound. And what I found is I can get into such a deeper train of thought. It's like meditation with like mantra. It's like you say it and it basically gets you in this trance because you're focused on it, but then you lose yourself in it and then you like this whole world appears. And I find it's almost like a meditative state when I'm listening to the music. It's just music. It's just sounds. And it could be like spa-like or, study or massage or whatever, but it's going on and you get lost where you don't even hear the music.
Right.
And I can focus on what I'm doing, but I'm not focusing on what I'm doing it's like a weird play on your brain because it allows my thought and creativity to open up even though there's a distraction.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the term that people may call that would be it's a distraction technique.
Yeah.
It's a distraction.
It fills in the quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that I've found having done it more because it truly gets noise canceling where this probably could actually act as noise canceling a little bit, but it just blocks everything. And I just like zone right out and in a good way for me, like, cause I use it typically when I'm trying to do something like stressful on the brain from work. But
I've had people I've heard of people doing the same song on repeat when they're trying to write or, type up something or even putting the same movie on in the background, just on like a loop.
Yeah.
But
I think it's also one, if I listen to, like people say music, if I put a song on or not ambient, like if I put on a band I like,
right,
but it's a song I've heard or an album I've heard thousands of times, it just becomes background noise. It acts as the same thing. It's a little more, enjoyable, but it acts as the same. Then if I put a new song on or even some music that I'm aware of but don't know well, or I put on a live version of maybe a band that you don't really know how they talk or what they're saying during the songs, like, improv and all that stuff or talking to the crowd, that stuff actually draws me more into the music to the point where I get distracted by it.
Right.
Where if I'm listening to something that is like, I know exactly when the notes are going to happen. I know when maybe the person talks to the crowd. I know everything about this album. Then it becomes truly background.
Well, it's no different than riding in the car on the highway with, your wife or some friends in the car. And then all of a sudden you get to the city.
Yeah.
And what do you find yourself instinctively doing is turning the volume down.
Yeah.
Because now you're focused on traffic.
Yeah.
And looking for signs and everything else. Nothing really changed.
Yeah.
But your ability to kind of focus has changed.
That's why one of the best, everybody's done this. One of the best things I think you could do for thinking is driving solo through the Adirondacks.
Oh,
Because you literally zone out.
Yeah.
And that's why I call the podcast, like, I attribute the podcast to a version of, if you made a 20-minute podcast, that's like driving anywhere outside of Plattsburgh to center of Plattsburgh.
Yeah.
It's quick. If I said, hey, drive to Albany, everybody knows it's a 2.5-hour ballpark drive down to Albany, and you get to a point about, I would say, 30 to 45 minutes into the trip where things start to slow down, calm down. They just kind of get in this, like, you know, almost like a dreamlike state of just driving, especially if you're by yourself, listen to music, podcast, whatever you're in. So I find that's why a lot of people, when they come on the podcast, they start to settle down after a handful of minutes in. And typically, as you go along, like say we hit like the hour, then it becomes a lot more just relaxing, and people kind of fall into a space. You start talking, your thoughts open up, you go deeper on stuff, you make connections, things become a little more clear. But I feel like you've taken all the outside distractions and minimized it.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said by that. And that's why I like long form podcasts, because we never would have went to half this stuff had it been a 20-minute. John, what do you do normally? Like, I'm a chiropractor. Like,
no.
So, but I think kind of like pulling back the layers on that, or even working, like I like to block off when I work, typically 3 to 4 hours in the morning if I can. Like, I really try to block off nothing. That's what I'm doing. My phone shut off. Like, I'm pretty much a recluse, like, for the first part of my day. And then my second part of my day is when I do all the other stuff. Yeah. But I got to get into that deep mental state. And it's not like I'm in the mental state for 4 hours. I might only get into the mental state for an hour and a half of that. But for me, it's having to get into that really solid, zoned out time frame. Because you can't do it if you're like, I'm going to give myself an hour to work on this project. Because by the time you settle down, it's like, I got 10 minutes. I won't have time. I just stop. So
no, I agree. It's what I tend to listen to too when I'm driving or working out, is the longer form podcast stuff.
Yeah. Well, John, we're going to wrap this up. I'll have you back on, I promise, sooner than I did last time. But I always enjoy it. I think you're a wealth of knowledge.
Wide-ranging, man.
Yeah, and I'm going to probably have to hold on to this because you wrote down a lot of stuff we didn't even get to. I didn't even talk about nutrition. Well, we talked a little bit about nutrition, like hydration, supplements, recovery protocols, max. I mean, there's some stuff you put on here that.
When you had asked me about that, I had kind of thought like, hey, we could just do a total episode just on myth busting. Like things I hear every single day in my office that are so wrong.
I underscored it, and I'm like, I started writing down stuff.
That would be a whole other podcast.
Yeah, well, I'll have you back. This was
because we could break through nutrition, supplements. We touched on the training, but there's a lot.
If anything else, I learned so much more about VO2 that really tied it all together to me, because I didn't understand it before. But that was
there's just as a final thought on that, because we did spend some time on it. There are several good books on this 80-20 training method.
Okay.
Again, the original guy was actually an MD who came up with it in the 80s, named Phil Maffetone. I think it's Maffetone. Don't quote me on that. Phil Maffetone. But if you do kind of zone 1-2, Phil Maffetone, it'll pop up. There's also a newer book called 80-20 Running.
Just that's the name?
80/20. Yep, the numbers. 80/20 Running, I believe, is the title. And I think that's Matt Fitzgerald is the author. And that'll give you some really good, more details about testing, testing yourself for your zones.
Yeah.
So you get a more accurate number. So if anyone's interested, those are great resources. Or like I said, I am starting to consider the fact I've got a new associate that just joined the practice a month ago. So I'm hoping over the next few months that frees up some time. So people want or are interested in possibly working with me or getting a program put together. They can always reach out through through my website is probably the easiest, or they can track me down on Instagram. Send me a message through there.
Yeah, I'll put a couple things in the notes, but no, I think that's cool. This
nice.
Is
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I always learn a lot from you, John, so I appreciate it. We'll wrap it up there. Like I said, I'll put some stuff in the show notes. John, Ideal Athlete Chiropractic. Consider Margaret or Durkee Street.
That's Durkee.
It'd be Durkee. So
43 Durkee.
Yeah, I've been seeing John for a decade now, and like I said, I don't think I'll ever stop until you tell me not to come. But
appreciate it, and you can always book. You can go right through my website is theidealathlete.com.
Perfect. All right, episode 257, the Galen Trombley Show. We're out. Thank you for listening to the Galen Trombley Show. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the episode. You can follow me on all social platforms at Galen Trombley. Thanks for listening.